Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Start with summoning the Shadow Troopers. Chapter 41. It was because of that storm that Peter became what he is now. As a friend, I don't want to see him go down like this, so Aunt May, can you help me? The news that Peter is Spider-Man shocked May Parker too much, so he was slow to respond to Richard's questions. Don't be like this. It didn't last, and May Parker, after all, was an old man with decades of experience who quickly accepted the reality. Then how can I help you? Hearing this, Richard's mouth suddenly showed a smile, and he said slowly, the reason why Peter became Spider-Man was because of what Uncle Ben said at the beginning, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. So Peter became a superhero. But Aunt May, you should know that heroes are not so easy to be, let alone superheroes. Everyone regards superheroes as gods and looks up to God. In their opinion, God can't have any mistakes, nor can there be any stains, and once there are stains, then he is no longer a god, but a demon, a devil that everyone spurns. Aunt May, do you think Peter is a god? Listening to Richard's question, May Parker was stunned and didn't know how to answer for a while, but in the end she slowly shook her head. Seeing this, Richard's smile grew even wider. Yes, Peter is not a god. He is just an ordinary person. Although he has extraordinary powers, he is only a teenager under 20 years old. He should enjoy the beauty of life, and he should also enjoy being with his companions, instead of being a hero hiding behind a mask, not only facing danger all the time, but even making a mess of his own life. And Peter has a girl he likes very much, but Peter doesn't dare to pursue his own happiness because of his identity as Spider-Man. So I hope Aunt May, you can enlighten him. Let him give up this unrealistic idea, and let him be his true self. Richard's remarks caused a great shock to May Parker, and her eyes instantly burst into tears. May Parker is a kind person, but she also has the selfishness that a person should have. Compared with Peter being a hero that everyone admires, she has to face countless dangers. She hoped that Peter could live a happy life, so in the face of Richard's request, he agreed without hesitation. Seeing May Parker nodding, Richard suddenly smiled knowingly. He didn't waste so much saliva. With May Parker's help, Peter would never be able to return to the past. Not long after the two of them chatted, Peter also appeared in the restaurant. Compared with the state of his room before, he has become clean and tidy now. Although his eyes are still slightly empty, it is not as if he was in the room just now. It is generally unresponsive to external things. When Daniel brought him to Richard and May Parker's side, Peter's originally empty eyes suddenly became bright, and his sanity began to gradually return. Peter's eyes slowly swept across May Parker's body, and finally locked on Richard's body. Who are you? Perhaps because he hadn't spoken for too long, Peter's voice was not only hoarse, but also a little difficult. In the face of Peter's question, Richard did not panic at all, and admitted his identity directly and generously. Peter's eyes met each other and said, I am you. After speaking, Richard suddenly laughed, and his smile was full of jokes. And after hearing the familiar words, Peter's face was stunned for a moment, and that black figure appeared in his mind instantly. Although Richard's appearance is completely different from that black figure at the moment, the tone of voice he spoke just now and his present demeanor are exactly the same as that black figure. So far, Peter didn't know that he had been deceived. But Peter was not angry, or that all his emotions had already been completely consumed in that wave of internet storms. At this time, May Parker looked at Peter with a distressed look on the side, and slowly said, My child, this little boy has already told me about you. After the words fell, a strong fluctuation flashed in Peter's eyes, and his eyes were directly locked on Richard's body. Seeing this, Richard smiled and did not speak. And May Parker patted Peter's hand and said, My child, I don't want you to be a hero, and I don't need you to get many honors. I just want you to live a healthy and happy life. Maybe we could change countries and live as well, but you have to cheer up, you know, Peter. May Parker said sincerely. Every word, like a warm current, melted into Peter's heart. Suddenly, Peter gritted his teeth suddenly, looked at May Parker and said, Aunt May, it was me who killed me. Uncle Ben, if it wasn't for me, Uncle Ben wouldn't have an accident, it's all my fault. Hearing this, May Parker's body suddenly swayed, and her face instantly turned pale. For a while, the whole person froze in place, while Peter slowly lowered his head. After a long time, May Parker let out a long sigh, shook her head and said, "It's all over, Peter. Ben, do good in life, God will bless him. It's none of your business, it's Ben's destiny. You don't need to put all the blame on yourself, you should have your own life." After speaking, May Parker touched Peter's head and slowly got up and left the restaurant. Seeing this scene, Peter didn't say anything, and Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. Obviously, Peter's words still had a certain impact on the old man, and even Richard didn't know what to say about it. However, after May Parker left, Peter quickly recovered his emotions and looked at Richard sharply. The righteousness that used to exist in Peter has completely disappeared at this moment. Standing in front of Richard now is Peter, who has completely fallen into darkness. "What's your purpose?" Peter asked straight to the point, and Richard also didn't mean to cover up. "Join me and help me." As soon as these words came out, Peter didn't even think about it, and directly refused. "I won't join your subordinates, you can go." After speaking, Peter got up and wanted to leave. Richard saw this, but he was still calm, still sitting calmly in the chair, and his voice sounded unhurriedly. "Tell you one thing, you have been wanted by the Star Stripe Federation. As long as you walk out of the gate of this hotel, the people of the Star Stripe Federation will entangle you like a vicious dog. Perhaps you are so confident in your own strength that you don't care, but do you think they will let Aunt May go? Or can you guarantee that they won't do anything drastic to Aunt May, forcing you to capture it? Even if you can take Aunt May out of the Star Pick Federation, but Aunt May is so old, you have to let her escape from your homeland with you, do you really have the heart?" Richard spoke in a calm tone, telling about this matter that had nothing to do with him, but as his words sounded, Peter, who was about to leave, suddenly froze in place, and the expression on his face was even worse, constant change. For this scene, Richard had long expected, and a smile suddenly appeared on his face. As for Peter's death spot, Richard knew very well from the very beginning that no matter how darkened he was, it was impossible for him to ignore his only relative. So looking at Peter's appearance, Richard is not in a hurry at all, he believes he will agree. At this moment, Richard suddenly remembered another thing, and then he patted his head and said, "I forgot to tell you, your friend Harry Osborne, and your dream goddess Mary Jane, because the Stars and Stripes Federation wants to investigate your true identity and find them, so they are now in custody, and if you don't get caught for a day, they will stay in prison forever. I heard that they are mixed prisoners, and I don't know how they are doing." If Richard's previous words had shaken Peter, then these words have completely penetrated all his defenses. "Enough. Say no more. Tell me where they are." Peter roared loudly, his face looking a little hideous. Richard glanced at him, and immediately sneered, "Are you planning to forcefully save people? They are just assisting in the investigation now. If you rush to rescue them, they will instantly become wanted criminals. Do you think they will thank you or hate you?" Boom. After listening to this, Peter slumped down on the chair and looked at Richard, who was smiling from beginning to end. A touch of uncontrollable fear suddenly rose from the bottom of his heart, making him involuntarily beat him, shivered. In his mind, he couldn't help recalling the scenes of his contact with Richard. From the beginning to now, he suddenly found himself being led by Richard's nose all the time. And not by coercion, but by making him have to follow the path that Richard gave him. Thinking of this, Peter gave up his struggle in an instant. All his pride, and all his strength, were now shattered by Richard's trampling. "I agree to join, can you help me save them?" When the words fell, Richard got up with a smile and stretched out his right hand at him. "Don't worry, they'll be fine, I assure you. Also, welcome to the Dark Alliance." When Richard came out of the hotel, it was noon, and he looked up at the sky. I wonder if it was an illusion. Richard felt that the sky today was extremely depressing. Gray clouds shrouded the sky, making the earth a little gloomy, and everything seemed to be a precursor to a storm, which made people's hearts sink slightly. At that moment Richard said to himself expressionlessly, "It's getting dark, it's going to rain." After he finished speaking, he just got into the car. Daniel helped him close the door and quickly got into the driver's seat. The car started and drove away slowly. In a certain military base in New York City, a large number of soldiers began to assemble quickly. All of them were carrying guns and live ammunition. A total of 5,000 soldiers were concentrated on the square, which made the whole scene look very shocking. Colonel Rhodes glanced sharply at the army, and beside him, Fury watched this scene and nodded with satisfaction. Although General Ross knocked away a design drawing of top individual soldier equipment, things were done very beautifully, with a full 5,000 elite soldiers under his command. There are even 3 King of Land tanks with them. It can be said that this lineup is already luxurious. And these are just the support provided by General Ross, not all the forces Fury has prepared. And with these things, Fury is more confident about tonight's action. Listen, everyone, we are going to carry out a secret operation tonight, and the information of the operation is prohibited from leaking. If anyone leaks the content of this operation, I will personally send him to a military court. Do you understand? Rhodes said loudly with a loudspeaker in his hands. There was a neat and shocking response from below, understood. Seeing this, Colonel Rhodes nodded with satisfaction, then turned to look at Fury beside him and said, "Do you want to say a few words to Director Fury?" Hearing this, Fury shook his head. "No need, I'll leave everything to you for tonight's actions, I hope you can follow my command." Hearing this, Colonel Rhodes immediately assured, "Please rest assured, we will faithfully implement your orders." Seeing this, Fury nodded immediately, and did not stay any longer, but turned to the reception room of the military base and went to see someone. This time, in addition to providing military help, General Ross also provided a strong man, David Banner. David is Bruce Banner's biological father and possesses some mysterious ability to transform himself into the person or thing he touches, and possess the full power of the other party. It is a secret trump card of General Ross. And this time, in order to encircle and suppress Jin Bing, General Ross released him directly. It is conceivable how deeply General Ross hates Jin Bing. The David Fury saw in the reception room, David looked ordinary, nothing out of the ordinary, just an ordinary bad old man. But Fury didn't dare to underestimate him. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury naturally had information on David, but it was precisely because he knew him that he was afraid of him. Came to sit down in front of David, and Fury was vigilantly separated from him to avoid him touching him. Seeing this scene, David smiled but said nothing. Although Fury was vigilant in his behavior, he did not show the slightest on his face. Instead, he said with a kind smile, "To deal with Jin Bing tonight, I will leave it to you." Jin Bing's strength is very strong. It is rumored that he has reached the limit of the human body, and he has mastered the world's top fighting skills. At that time, you will need to stop him. Listening to Fury's words, David nodded to show that he knew, and said at the same time, "As long as I get in touch with him, then everything will be no problem." Listening to his confident tone, coupled with the intelligence records in S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury's heart was completely relieved. In fact, he has made all the preparations. The reason why he has to ask Fury is to let Fury stop Jinbian, otherwise if Jinbian wants to escape, if he escapes, then everything he does at all became useless. As long as Jin is not dead, his power will not dissipate, so Jin must die. With everything done, Fury left the military base and returned to S.H.I.E.L.D. Although tonight's task is important, Fury will not play in person, and will only command within S.H.I.E.L.D. That's why he went to see Colonel Rhodes and David and explained things clearly in advance. And now everything has been arranged, the rest is to wait for the night to come. While Fury was waiting for the opportunity, Daniel had already driven a car and brought Richard to the laboratory. This time Richard did not go to the 10th floor, but went directly to the 5th floor, which has now become Otto's laboratory. No matter how much you prepare for something like the backhand, it is not too much, especially when you are about to fight a behemoth like S.H.I.E.L.D., the more backhands, the better. So after getting Peter, Richard went straight to Otto. Walking into the laboratory on the 5th floor, the entire laboratory seemed very quiet. Instead, it was the training room at the end of the corridor. At this moment, there was a bang, bang, bang. It was as if some giant was smashing the wall madly. Hearing this voice, Richard's eyes suddenly lit up. Although he hadn't seen Otto yet, Richard already had a faint guess in his heart. Soon when he came to the door of the training room, he saw a figure in the training room. Otto was naked, and behind him, 4 mechanical tentacles had been perfectly integrated into his back, and at the moment he was testing the flexibility of his own manipulation of the mechanical tentacles. Seeing this scene, Richard suddenly laughed. Originally, He was a little worried about whether Otto had grafted the mechanical tentacles, but now it turns out that Dr. Octopus is still the same Dr. Octopus, and he was born with some kind of close connection with these 4 mechanical tentacles, even if there is no so-called accident. Grafting and implantation are also completed. As Richard walked into the training room, Otto, who was testing, also stopped and greeted respectfully, "Boss." Hearing this, Richard nodded and said directly, "Get dressed and follow me. I have something to deal with tonight." After the words fell, Otto did not ask any questions. The mechanical tentacle behind him brought him clothes directly. After Otto put it on, he followed behind Richard and walked outside. Because of the active choice to integrate, the mechanical tentacles are completely different from the original, but they can be retracted. Therefore, the mechanical tentacles, which were just over 10 meters long, were now almost perfectly hidden behind Otto. Although Otto's back was slightly raised, he couldn't see anything unusual if he didn't look carefully. Taking Otto downstairs, the two got into the car directly, and Daniel, who was waiting in the car, also kicked the accelerator to start the car, and slowly drove towards the Emperor Building, Jin Bing's nest. The Emperor Building, as high as the 36th floor, is one of the tallest buildings in New York City. And here is Jin Bing, the underground emperor's lair. For the crowds in the underground world, this place is like the ancient palace, and the current presidential palace is a sacred, majestic and inviolable place. But today, the emperor's building was very quiet. When Richard and his party came here, the entire emperor's building was completely empty. In this regard, neither Daniel nor Richard showed any strange expressions. Although Otto was a little puzzled, he did not ask any questions. When Richard and his party took the elevator to the top floor of the 36th floor, they finally saw a living person. After the elevator door opened, there was a passage that was 100 meters long, and on both sides of the passage, at this moment, there was a burly man. These people exuded a terrifying aura, and their eyes filled with murderous intent, making the 3 people who had just arrived on the 36th floor instantly feel a chilling atmosphere. As the elevator door opened, the strong men on both sides of the aisle turned their heads to look at the elevator door. If he was a timid person, he might have been frightened to the point where his feet and legs were weak. But one of the 3 is Jin Bing's son, the other is Jin Bing's confidant, and Dr. Octopus is the big villain in the original book, so this little scene naturally can't scare them. After seeing the 3 of them, the strong men on both sides of the passage shifted their gazes, neither saying hello nor looking at them. All of them stood there like logs. The 3 of Richard didn't care too much about this, and went directly to the door of the office along the aisle, and pushed open the office. As soon as I entered the door, I saw Jin Bing, who was sitting on an office chair with a golden sword. At this time, Jin Bing was completely different from the Jin Bing at home. The mountain exuded an aura of solemnity, and the expressionless face was full of ferocity and domineering. Now he is the underworld emperor Jin Bing, who controls the entire underground kingdom of New York City. Instead of being the loving father and loving husband at home. To be honest, it was the first time Richard met Jin Bing in this state, and he was stunned for a while. As for Daniel, although he has seen him more than once, his heart trembles slightly every time he sees him. Even the big villain in the original novel, Dr. Octopus, looked at Jin Bing sitting in the office chair at this moment, and his aura that had become somewhat brutal because of the transplant of the mechanical arm was completely suppressed, and his eyes were full of fear and jealousy. He glanced at Jin Bing curiously, and then quickly retracted his gaze. Among the 3, Richard was the least affected. The reason why he was stunned just now was because he had never seen Jin Bing in such a state. Now that he recovered, Richard walked directly to the sofa beside him. "Sit down." Only Dr. Octopus and Daniel were left standing honestly where they were. Until Jin and said, "Sit down, Diaresis." When the words fell, Daniel and Dr. Octopus breathed a sigh of relief, especially Dr. Octopus. Under the influence of Jin Bing, he almost couldn't help but start directly. Because the danger was beating wildly in his mind, waiting for me to sense it, including the 4 mechanical arms on his back, which were constantly beating. If Jin hadn't taken the initiative to speak, I'm afraid he would have summoned the mechanical tentacles at this moment. After the 2 sat down, Jin turned his gaze to Richard and asked in a calm tone, "Do you still have helpers coming? If not, all those who break into this building will die later." Jin Bing's words seemed very bland, as if what he said was not a life, but what to eat tonight. And Richard's reaction was also very dull. There's still a little spider coming over, he should be there soon. Hearing this, Jin Bing nodded and stopped speaking, and the office fell into complete silence. Richard didn't wait too long, and after 20 minutes, the little spider arrived. However, he did not come in from the main door, but jumped in directly from the window, which was in line with his style. Since he awakened his ability, he usually walked through the window when he visited. The little spider at this moment has become completely different than before. First of all, his spider has completely turned into pure black, and secondly, he has become more evil and dangerous when he wears the black spider clothes. Of course, the spider on him is just an ordinary spider suit, not a symbiote, but the fact is so strange, the little spider that fell into the dark is obviously stronger than when it is in the light. This change can be completely judged from the breath emanating from his body. And when everyone was looking at the little spider also looked at everyone, not to mention Richard and Daniel, they had met before. What really made little spider care about was Dr. Octopus and Jin Bing. The two made him feel more dangerous than the other. Especially Jin Bing. When his eyes fell on the little spider suddenly had the illusion of being stared at by the wild beast. Fortunately, Jin Chi took a look and looked away, so the little spider quickly quieted down. With the arrival of all the personnel, the atmosphere in the office became more and more depressing, because the next person who came here would be all enemies. Time passed slowly, and the clocks in the office kept ticking. When the time came to 12 midnight, a bright bell rang suddenly, which lifted everyone's spirits. On the periphery of the Emperor's building, a large number of soldiers have also arrived here at this moment, pulling up the blockade, completely blocking the entire periphery of the Emperor's building. At that time, no matter who escaped from the Emperor's building, it is inevitable that they must pass through their blockade. Therefore, Colonel Rhodes deliberately left 1,000 soldiers behind and firmly guarded the intersections of the fortresses. As for the remaining 4,000 soldiers, as well as the 3 tanks of the King of Marine Wars, they began to approach the Emperor's building. Get it? In S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury glanced at the appearance of his hand, and then looked at the scene through the surveillance video in front of him, and immediately picked up a wireless walkie-talkie, and ordered, "Diaresis, action." The wireless walkie-talkie he used is enough to communicate across the entire New York City, so there is no problem with communication distance. And with Fury's order, the 4,000 soldiers suddenly accelerated their pace and rushed towards the Emperor's building. In front of them, a group of 100 people, faster than them, completely opened the distance from them in a short time, making these soldiers unmatched. And these people are naturally super soldiers built by Fury himself, and even David is in it. He absorbed and copied the ability of a super soldier, so he easily kept up with them. Thousands of people ran in unison, and the footsteps sounded like an earthquake. Even those who stayed on the 36th floor, Richard and others heard such a big movement. Suddenly Richard got up slowly, came to the window and looked down. Looking at the large crowd of people downstairs, Richard's mouth suddenly evoked a smile. They're really worth the money. They even pulled out the soldiers of the Star Stripe Federation. Those who didn't know it thought they were going to fight. Richard said in a flat tone, as if he was telling a trivial matter. Among the people present, except for Daniel's slightly nervous expression, Jin and the others did not change their color at all because of Richard's words. And this is the confidence brought by the strength. On the first floor of the Empire State Building, when 101 people, including David, rushed into it, they were stunned when they saw the empty scene inside. Feist, the captain of the 100 super soldiers, reacted immediately and quickly reported the news to Fury. Fury, who was sitting at the back, listened to Pfister's report, frowned slightly, and immediately switched to the camera that Pfister carried with him, and saw the scene for the first time. Looking at the empty first floor, everything was in order. Obviously, it was not an emergency evacuation, but it had been evacuated for a long time. Apparently, Kim had already heard the news of their coming, and Fury wasn't too surprised. With Jin Bing's power, even if he didn't know the first time, this kind of thing would never be hidden from him, otherwise Fury wouldn't be so jealous of Jin Bing. What really surprised him was that there were no soldiers in ambush on the first floor, and there were no shadows on the ground and walls, which made him a little uncertain. The reason why I want to see if there are shadows on the ground is because Fury came to the conclusion after repeatedly watching the surveillance video of the invasion of S.H.I.E.L.D. That is those men in black. Before they appear, a black shadow will appear on the ground, and there will be blood-red eyes. In this way, the threat level of Sombra Ninja is greatly reduced. After all, there are obvious flaws, which can be prevented in advance. And through the surveillance video, Fury also found that ordinary bullets have no effect at all for these men in black, and must have powerful firearms. Therefore, the troops dispatched this time are equipped with the best firearms, just to deal with the men in black. Originally, there was nothing wrong with Fury's analysis, and even judged that powerful firearms can cause damage to Sombra. But he ignored one point after all, that is, the haunting of Sombra ninjas is always without warning. The reason why there will be black shadows when invading S.H.I.E.L.D. is entirely to search for Paul's traces at that time. And in addition, Fury didn't know that the number of Sombra ninjas was endless. As long as there was enough power, there would be enough Sombra core. Until now, Richard still hadn't calculated the limit of his summoning. So these two fatal mistakes laid the groundwork for their failure from the very beginning. After hesitating for a while, looking at Fisk and his party who were still waiting for the order, Fury decisively ordered, "Go ahead, take Jinbian as the first goal, he is very likely to be on the top 36th floor." "Yes," SFIK responded loudly, and with a wave of his hand, he directly led the crowd into the Emperor's building. And not long after they entered, the 4,000 soldiers who were maintaining the formation also followed and rushed into it. Richard, who was standing on the top floor, watched condescendingly as everyone filed in, and a bloodthirsty smile appeared on his face. "The guests are here, it's time to serve." After speaking, Richard turned to look at Jin Bing, who pressed a red button on the desk at the same time. Suddenly, in the hall on the first floor, many soldiers who had just rushed into it found that the glass door behind them had closed by themselves. Immediately, many people were shocked, and Colonel Rhodes, who had entered at the end of the unit CGFB, saw this scene, and his expression changed instantly. The back road is cut off, this is definitely not a good thing. However, as an elite commander, although Colonel Rhodes' face changed, he did not panic. Regarding the existence of Sombra Ninja, Fury will naturally not forget to report such important information to Colonel Rhodes. Therefore, when he saw that the back road was cut off, Colonel Rhodes quickly reacted, and through the wireless headset, he issued the order immediately. "Everyone slow down. In groups of 5, keep moving back to back, and if you see anything moving, don't hesitate to shoot." Colonel Rhodes' voice rang in the ears of all the soldiers. Suddenly, the formation of the 4,000 soldiers changed. With 5 people as a unit, they quickly formed small groups. In this way, no matter which direction there is a sneak attack, they can see it at the first time. On the top floor, the computer on Jin Bing's desk is connected to the monitoring of the entire Emperor building, so that Jin Bing and others can immediately understand the changes in the situation on the battlefield. Richard stood beside Jin Bing, watching the formation of the Star-Spangled Federation soldiers in the surveillance, and a playful smile suddenly evoked at the corner of his mouth. Colonel Rhodes' tactical arrangement is really good. Before that, Richard might have some headaches. After all, the firearms in the hands of these soldiers are not vegetarian, and a group of 5 is enough to make them form crossfire. As long as there is enough ammunition, it is theoretically enough to block anyone's advance route. Of course this was before, and now, from the beginning, Richard had no intention of raiding. As one of the few troops on the frontal battlefield, the giant Shadow Corps not only has a strong destructive power on the battlefield but also has an extremely powerful defense. If you have to make a metaphor, it is equivalent to a humanoid tank. With the giant Shadow Corps' hard attacking attack, both the Sombra Ninja and the Claw Shadow Corps have become more flexible and have more room to play. Therefore, just after the formation of the 4,000 soldiers changed, with the order from Richard's heart, the 3 major corps that had been silent for a long time suddenly opened their blood-red eyes like tigers out of their cages. The Emperor building has a total of 36 floors, and now the 100 super soldiers and David Banner have reached the 10th floor without encountering any resistance along the way. As for the 4,000 soldiers behind, the frontmost team has reached the 5th floor, and the last person has also reached the 2nd floor. With Richard's order, no one from the Sombra Corps appeared to stop the 100 super soldiers and David Banner. On the contrary, the 4,000 soldiers just felt a flash in front of their eyes. The next moment, when they looked closely, they saw that the originally empty floor was now occupied by the 3 major corps. They are surrounded. Fire! The personnel of the Black Shadow Corps suddenly appeared and surrounded them in an instant. All the soldiers were stunned for a moment. This is a human instinct. And at the moment when they were in a daze, Colonel Ryrod's voice suddenly woke them up. At the moment, the Emperor building, which had been quiet 1 second ago, was suddenly loud in the next second. Countless bullets formed a dense metal storm, sweeping towards the Black Shadow Corps. This time, the Shadow Corps is no longer fighting alone, but the cooperation between the 3 arms. Therefore, in the face of the terrifying metal storm, all the giant shadows stepped out at the same time, using their huge bodies to isolate the terrifying metal storm. At the same time, countless Black Shadow ninjas jumped up from behind the giant shadow, one after another. Cross marks instantly let go. There was a strong air-breaking sound. The speed of the cross was not slower than that of the bullet, and the lethality was also only strong or weak. And the Shadow Corps has a giant shadow as a meat shield, but the soldiers of the Star-Striped Federation don't. In an instant, countless cross marks rushed into the crowd, and a scream suddenly sounded. At least hundreds of people were directly killed by this wave of attacks. And there are still some people, although they escaped the key points, but they were also hit hard. In the first time, the metal storm created by the soldiers of the Gold Bullion Federation weakened a lot in an instant. And when things came to this, the attack of the Black Shadow Corps was still unfinished. At the crossroads in the hands of the General Sombra Ninja, the Claw Shadow Corps jumped up one after another. The sharp claws in their hands provide them with powerful attack power, and the feet-like thorns allow them to walk on the ground in any terrain. In addition, the speed of the Claw Shadow is extremely fast. Gotta get on the subway. Therefore, the distance between the 2 sides is less than 200 meters, and for the Claw Shadow, there is no difference between being close at hand. Therefore, just after the soldiers of the Star-Striped Federation recovered from the cross attack of the Sombra Ninja, they immediately ushered in the killing of the Claw Shadow. The Claw Shadow rushing into the crowd is like a god of death walking in the world. With a wave of the claws, someone must fall to the ground under its claws. Their throats were cut by Claw Shadow, their chests were torn by Claw Shadow, and all the protective equipment they carried, facing Claw Shadow's sharp claws, was almost no different from tofu. Ah, God, it's a bunch of devils. No, go away, don't come here. Shet, fake, crying, scolding, collapsing, all kinds of emotions surfaced on the faces of the Stars and Stripes soldiers. As the Claw Shadow tore a hole in the crowd, the Giant Shadow and the Black Shadow Ninja quickly rushed into the crowd. Sombra ninjas are agile and good at attacking from behind. All Sombra ninjas have a short blade in their hands, and their figures keep passing by the crowd, and one soldier has their throats cut by them. The death that was originally staged on the battlefield now has an artistic atmosphere in their hands. They are like ghosts on the battlefield, killing one step at a time and dancing gracefully. In contrast, the Giant Shadow's attack method is much more explosive. With his tall body and absolute strength, one punch is enough to smash a person into powder. They were like bulldozers, raging wildly in the crowd. Some star-striped federal soldiers who had finally assembled a good formation were scattered again by the Giant Shadow before they could launch an attack. Under the protection of a group of soldiers, Colonel Rhodes looked at the chaotic battlefield in front of him. At this moment, his eyes were full of disbelief, and his body was constantly shaking. They are confident, they carry the best gear, they don't take it lightly, they avoid all risk of failure. But now the battle is still lost. Although the battle is not over yet, when the Claw Shadows tore their defense line, it is already doomed to the end of their defeat. The scene in front of you can no longer be called a battle, it is a one-sided slaughter. The top individual soldier equipment in their hands is not much better than burning fire sticks at this moment, and some soldiers even start shooting at their own people in panic. Looking at this scene, a tragic smile appeared on Colonel Rhodes' face, and the whole person's spirit was obviously dealt a great blow. They came full of confidence, but in the end they persisted under the Black Shadow Corps for less than a round, and they became the target of torture. As the military chief, even if he returns alive this time, he will definitely go to a military court. At the moment, Colonel Rhodes turned on the headset and issued the final order. Escape. One who can escape is one. After the words fell, the soldiers of the Star Stripe Federation, who had completely collapsed, carried out Rhodes' orders for the first time. Everyone began to flee frantically, trying to leave the Emperor's mansion, this land of demons that devoured people's lives. But no matter what kind of struggle they did, it was nothing but useless work in the face of the slaughter of the Black Shadow Corps. Blood flowed on all floors, and the corpses all over the floor told of the ferocity of the battle. Colonel Rhodes saw that he was completely surrounded by the Shadow Legion, and roared with a frenzied smile, "Rod Nick, sacrifice, please. Commander, let the soldiers on the periphery retreat, this is a group of demons." After finishing speaking, Colonel Rhodes picked up the firearm in his hand and swept directly towards the Black Shadow Corps. In the next second, a Black Shadow ninja appeared behind him, and the short blade ran through his throat. In the end, Colonel Rhodes' figure froze, and his eyes completely lost the color of life. This elite commander did not choose to escape at the last moment, but ended his life in battle as a soldier. And with the death of Colonel Rhodes, this battle has officially entered the countdown. The soldiers who tried to escape from the Emperor's building finally rushed to the first floor, only to find that the entrance had been closed. They frantically raised their guns and fired at the glass doors, but unfortunately these doors were made of specially made bulletproof glass. Not to mention bullets, even grenades may not be able to explode. And behind them, the Black Shadow Corps has followed. At 12:30 midnight, it was only 20 minutes before the Stars and Stripes Federation soldiers entered the Emperor's building. All 4,000 soldiers were buried in the Emperor's building. Inside S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury sat on the spot with an ugly face. At this moment, Rhodes' voice still seems to be echoing in his headset. Just like the 100 super soldiers who carried cameras, the 4,000 elite soldiers, all officers of the rank, all carried cameras. Therefore, Fury not only heard Rhodes' tragic roar, but also witnessed Rhodes' end. There was an ugly look on his black face, and Fury's fists were tightly clenched together. He was not angry because of the death of 4,000 soldiers, but because of Jin Bing's bottomless strength. He thought he had understood everything and mastered all the intelligence information, so he brazenly launched this battle. But when the battle started, I looked at the Dark Shadow Corps that suddenly appeared without warning, looked at the tall giant shadow, and looked at the claw shadow that was as fast as a meteor. Fury suddenly realized how big a mistake he had made, and rashly acted without a thorough investigation of the opponent's strength, which is simply a stupid behavior. And this time it was himself who was stupid, which made him unacceptable. However, there is no time to continue to struggle with him at the moment. There are two paths in front of him. Do you want to continue fighting? Now his 100 super soldiers and David Banner have arrived on the 33rd floor of the Empire State Building, which is close to Jin and can be said to be. But the further back they are, the more vigilant they are, so the speed can't help slowing down. If Fury is willing, he can immediately stop this operation and let them withdraw quickly, otherwise God knows what means Jin has prepared for them. But Fury is not reconciled. It is not that he cannot accept failure, but he cannot accept that he has failed one after another at the hands of one person. He wanted to capture Spider-Man, because Jin Bing failed to intervene, suppressed Jin Bing's industry, and wanted to teach him a lesson, but Jin Bing's revenge also failed. And this time, such a big move was made with great fanfare, and he wanted to wipe out Jin Bing in one fell swoop, for which 4,000 federal soldiers' lives have been paid. If he fails again, not only will he be held accountable, but even the prestige of S.H.I.E.L.D. will be completely lost. So at this moment, he has already been riding a tiger, and only by killing Jin Bing can he solve the current predicament, otherwise, waiting for his end will definitely not be much better. Thinking of this, Fury's face sank, and his tone was cold and oppressive, and he ordered, "Speed up, you must win the gold, no matter what method you use." Fury's order was immediately conveyed to the ears of Super Soldier Squad Captain Feist through the wireless walkie-talkie. Fister was in constant shape, and did not answer Fury's words, but waved his hand directly, and the speed of the group increased again, and soon came to the 35th floor. One more floor up and they'll reach the top of the Empire State Building. At the same time, in the office, Richard stood beside Jin and watched the surveillance screen, then turned to look at Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man. "Our guests are here, who of you will say hello?" As soon as the voice fell, Spider-Man was about to leave, but Dr. Octopus stood up immediately. He wanted to test the power of his mechanical tentacles a long time ago, but he never had the chance. And now is obviously a good opportunity. That's why Dr. Octopus is so active. Watching Dr. Octopus get up, Little Spider shrugged and sat back on the sofa again, while Dr. Octopus walked directly outside the office. At the entrance of the stairs on the 36th floor, the 200 big men who were originally guarding both sides of the passage have slowly gathered here at this moment. They are Jinbian's most loyal subordinates, and they have obtained the super serum bestowed by Jinbian, and they have gained great power. They are the guards of Jinbian, and anyone who tries to break into this place is their enemy. After being strengthened by the super serum, the ears and eyes are clear, but it is the most basic, so even if they are separated by one floor, they can hear the movement on the 35th floor. In the same way, Fister and others heard their movements across the floor, so although the two sides have not officially met yet, a chilling atmosphere has permeated the middle of the two gangs. At this moment, the door of Jin Bing's office slowly opened, and Dr. Octopus walked out of it. His figure slowly moved forward, and behind him, 4 mechanical tentacles slowly grew out. Soon the 4 mechanical tentacles that were 15 meters long stretched out completely, directly dragging Dr. Octopus from the ground. The 2 mechanical tentacles replaced the legs and walked to the stairs step by step. Boom, boom, boom. Slightly heavy footsteps sounded slowly, and a fierce momentum was released from Dr. Octopus. For a time, the temperature of the entire corridor space dropped sharply, and the 200 strong men could not help but turn their heads to look at Dr. Octopus, then silently opened a passage and watched Dr. Octopus pass by them. The change on the 36th floor was caught by Feist and others at the first time, and everyone's eyes suddenly became a little flickering. They don't know what happened on the 36th floor, but obviously, the current change is definitely not good news for them. But now that the arrow is on the line, they have to send it, they have no way out. Immediately, Feister took a deep breath and slowly raised his right hand and waved it. In the next second, the people who were already ready suddenly rushed out like a cheetah. For this group of extraordinary people, the distance of one floor makes no difference at all, so the stairway where Dr. Octopus just came, just hit the oncoming super soldier. He wears a pair of special protective sunglasses on his eyes, so no one can see if there is any change in Dr. Octopus's eyes. But there was an indifference on his face from beginning to end, neither surprised by the sudden appearance of super soldiers, nor feared by them attacking him. Boom! With a loud noise, a mechanical tentacle behind Dr. Octopus protruded out like lightning, and a super soldier rushing in front did not even have the time to react. He was instantly hit by the mechanical tentacle and was directly smashed and flew out. A mechanical tentacle has a power of 8 tons, and the power of 8 tons burst out in an instant. How terrifying. Therefore, with just one blow, a super soldier injected with super serum was instantly seriously injured and dying. Witnessing this scene with my own eyes, the eyes of many super soldiers who are following closely are condensed, and there is a flash of horror in their eyes. But they are all elites selected by Fury, so even if the scene in front of them shocks them, they still can't stop their determination to attack. A burst of crimson light lit up above their palms, and all the super soldiers were holding a black object in their hands. And the crimson light is extending from this black object. This is the latest scientific research achievement of S.H.I.E.L.D. The laser sword has extremely powerful lethality. This time, it was also assembled on the body of the super soldier by Fury. Looking at the laser swords in the hands of many super soldiers, Dr. Octopus's face flashed a hint of hesitation, but he finally took a step back and exited the stairs. The narrow environment at the entrance of the stairs is not suitable for the use of mechanical tentacles. Coupled with the apparently powerful laser swords in the hands of super soldiers, out of prudence, Dr. Octopus will naturally not confront him in a place that is not conducive to his performance. The 200 people standing behind Dr. Octopus were naturally led by Dr. Octopus at this moment, so they stepped back one after another, blocked the passage to Jinbing's office, and confronted the super soldier. Fister, who finally rushed into the 36th floor, was not in a hurry to launch an attack at this moment. He didn't expect that just from the 35th floor to the 36th floor, his subordinates had already started to reduce staff. This was undoubtedly a not-so-stunning start, so he, who was already vigilant, became more stable. After all the super soldiers under him reached the 36th floor, Fister's eyes gradually became sharper. His eyes were locked on Dr. Octopus for the first time, not only because of the conspicuousness of Dr. Octopus, but also because of the power of Dr. Octopus. Glancing at David beside him from the corner of his eye, Pfister quickly said in a low tone, "He's handed over to you." Hearing this, David nodded indifferently, without showing any special expression. And at this moment, Pfister's whole body burst with killing intent, and a loud roar suddenly erupted from his mouth, "Kill!" Immediately, all the super soldiers responded and charged towards the crowd with laser swords in hand. And the 200 strong men in black are equally true at this moment. Although they are not as well equipped as super soldiers, they are twice as many as super soldiers. Therefore, the two sides can be regarded as having advantages and disadvantages of each other, and soon the two gangs collided fiercely. For a time, the entire 36th floor trembled suddenly at this moment, and the walls on both sides of the passage were completely shattered by the powerful aftermath caused by the fight between everyone. Suddenly, the entire battlefield expanded by more than 2 times in an instant. Everyone chose their opponents and fought endlessly. And David, at the very beginning of the battle, sneaked directly towards Dr. Octopus. At this moment, his sense of existence was extremely low, and even most people on the battlefield almost ignored him. And Dr. Octopus's attention was completely distracted by Feist at the moment, so he didn't find David's approach for a while. The strengthening of the human body by super serum is not static, but changes according to each person's physical potential and quality. And Feister's strength is undoubtedly the strongest among the super soldiers, and has reached the extraordinary second order. Although it is still incomparable to Dr. Octopus, it will not be instantly killed by Dr. Octopus, so the task of containing Dr. Octopus naturally falls on his head. The mechanical tentacles behind Dr. Octopus waved again and again at a speed like lightning, bringing with them dark golden afterimages in midair. Pfister tried his best to dodge. In just a few dozen seconds, Pfister had wandered around the edge of the gate of death for several times. At this moment, he has exerted his strength and speed to the extreme, so that he can last under Dr. Octopus for dozens of seconds, but this state is destined to be unsustainable, so Pfister is secretly anxious while supporting his heart. Just when he was about to lose his strength, David, who had reduced his presence to hundreds of millions, finally came behind Dr. Octopus. And Dr. Octopus, who was attacking, immediately noticed the abnormality behind him, and without turning his head, a mechanical tentacle whistled directly towards David behind him. The strong wind made David's face hurt, but as General Ross's secret weapon, David's strength is not only that. At the moment when the attack was about to approach, David instantly entered a virtual state and escaped the fatal blow. The next second his hand finally touched Dr. Octopus. Immediately, a mysterious force circulated in his body rapidly, and his stature also underwent a huge change at this moment. His back suddenly protruded, as if something was about to come out of his body, and his body shrank rapidly at this moment, and in a blink of an eye, he changed from a tall white man to the size of a 6 or 7-year-old child. But unfortunately, he didn't have the cuteness of a 6 or 7-year-old child, and instead looked extremely disgusting. The surface of the body was completely wrapped in wrinkled skin, and 4 bones with blood came out of his body, supporting his body. He perfectly replicated the abilities of Dr. Octopus, but unfortunately he did not have mechanical tentacles, so the mysterious power in his body directly fused his whole body bones together and turned into 4 bone tentacles. And the reason why his body has shrunk is because after the bones in the whole body are empty, there is only meat left. If it weren't for the mysterious power in his body, if anyone had their whole body skeleton pulled out, he would probably die instantly. All the changes were completed in the blink of an eye, and in an instant, there was another 4-clawed monster on the battlefield. But if Dr. Octopus is like an octopus, then David's image at the moment is more like a spider. At this moment, Dr. Octopus has ignored Pfister. At the moment when David's figure changed, he turned around and locked his eyes on David. Looking at the image of David at this time, Dr. Octopus did not attack rashly, but his eyes were full of interest. As a scientific researcher, Dr. Octopus' greatest love is research, and David is undoubtedly an excellent research object at the moment. Looking at the confrontation between the two, whether it was a super soldier or Jin Bing's guard, they all silently away from the battlefield between the two at this moment. If they are extraordinary, then these two guys are perverts, and they don't want to wait for the aftermath of the battle between these two. Therefore, the two Dr. Octopus were fighting vigorously, and only the two four-clawed monsters were looking at each other at the moment. And the battle situation on the battlefield also reached a strange balance at this moment. In the office, Jin Bing and his party were naturally aware of the movement outside the door. At this moment, the surveillance video was showing the entire battlefield. Looking at the changing situation on the battlefield, Daniel hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "That monster doesn't seem easy, do we need to go out and help?" Hearing this, Jin did not answer, while Richard watched the battle in the surveillance video with great interest, without turning his head back. "No, Dr. Octopus must be fine, the rest of the people can survive. We want elites, not waste." Richard's plain and cold words sounded slowly, and Daniel was stunned for a moment, and immediately closed his mouth wisely. At this time, outside the office, the battle between the super soldier and Jin Bing's subordinates has completely entered the heat. Jin Bing's subordinates are numerous and powerful, and the super soldiers are equipped with the latest laser swords developed by S.H.I.E.L.D. Therefore, the two gangs can be said to be pointed at maiming, and neither is willing to be weaker than the other. And because of Richard's advice, the Shadow Corps did not appear on this battlefield at all, so this battle can only be decided by themselves. The so-called strong people will never become strong simply by relying on their physical fitness, so even if these people are injected with super serum, in Richard's view, they are just some waste with better physical fitness. Only through the baptism of blood and fire can he be called the elite, so Richard is completely indifferent in the face of the sacrifices of these people. As for Jin Bing, he understands this better than Richard, so he naturally has no opinion on Richard's arrangement. At the center of the battlefield at this time, Dr. Octopus and David, who had been facing each other for a long time, finally moved at this moment. Their battles are different from those around them, they all rely on the tentacles behind them to fight. The assistant of Dr. Octopus is made of special metal, and also has a hint of spirituality, so it is more flexible and changeable in battle, and the angle of attack is also very tricky. In contrast, David's bone tentacles lacked this trace of spirituality, but since the tentacles originated from his bones, he could also command like an arm, without falling for a while. Not only that, but there is also a faint halo on David's tentacles. This is the characteristic endowed by the mysterious energy in his body, which makes the bone tentacles even more indestructible. Otherwise, if it is really just an ordinary bone, there is no way to withstand the collision of two powerful forces. Boom, boom, boom. A loud bang echoed continuously, and 8 tentacles were constantly entangled and collided in the air. Each of these tentacles possessed 8 tons of strength. Now, with the continuous explosion, the entire 36th floor was almost flattened by the two. There were originally offices on both sides of the passage. At this moment, the walls separated from the passage were all smashed to pieces, making the battlefield between the two continue to expand. In the face of this opponent who is very similar to himself, Dr. Octopus sends out more and more brutal, and the hostility in his bones is gradually and completely aroused. Right now, he seems to be the overlord of the deep sea, the big squid king. The mechanical tentacles behind him attack faster and faster, and they bring after images in the air. In contrast, David has been on an equal footing with Dr. Octopus from the very beginning, and now he has gradually fallen into the disadvantage. It is not that his strength is weaker than that of Dr. Octopus, but because the tentacles behind him are all driven by him, and because of a touch of spirituality, Dr. Octopus' tentacles can attack independently, greatly reducing the consumption of Dr. Octopus himself. As such, the longer the fight dragged on, the more dangerous David's situation became. For a time, David's face changed instantly, and on his ugly cheeks, a pair of eyes flashed with coldness. Looking at the increasingly domineering Dr. Octopus, David's hoarse voice suddenly sounded. "Come and help me." As soon as the voice fell, Feister, who had just brought down an opponent, heard David's words without a hint of hesitation on his face. But in the end, he still gritted his teeth and stepped into the battle range between the two. The laser sword in his hand exudes scalding heat, and Svit's eyes are locked on the body of Dr. Octopus. Compared to the 4 tentacles with enormous strength, Dr. Octopus itself is the real key. As an elite fighter, it is not difficult for SFIT to judge this. At the moment, while looking for an opportunity, SFIT roared loudly, "You are entangled with his 4 tentacles, I can't bear it and give it to me all at once." Hearing this, David instantly realized Sphit's purpose, and he didn't say much at the moment. He gritted his teeth and pushed the 4 tentacles with all his strength, madly entangled with the mechanical tentacles behind Dr. Octopus. For a time, the 8 tentacles were entangled in a ball, exerting force on each other, and constantly pulling, and the originally fierce battle scene became a stalemate in an instant. Seeing this scene, Sphit captured the fighter keenly, and the blood in his body suddenly surged, and Sphit's eyes became more serious than ever. As the captain of the super soldier squad, Sphit needs to understand everyone's abilities, so when David temporarily joined the squad, Sphit also got David's intelligence information. David's ability is indeed very powerful, but it has a certain time limit. Once the limited time is reached, the mysterious power in David's body will disappear. So while David still has spare energy, he must quickly solve the biggest threat of Dr. Octopus, otherwise, once David fails, with the strength of Dr. Octopus and 4 mechanical tentacles, they may not be enough for Dr. Octopus to kill. And now the opportunity has finally come. Dr. Octopus' mechanical tentacles are entangled with David's 4 bone tentacles, and without the protection of the mechanical tentacles, I am the best time to kill Dr. Octopus. As long as Dr. Octopus dies, the biggest threat on the battlefield will be gone, so even with Sphit's calmness, it is inevitable that his heartbeat will speed up at this moment. He slowly spit out a mouthful of turbid air, and clenched the laser sword in his hands with both hands. At the moment when the fighter plane appeared, Sphit's figure shot out like a cannonball directly towards the body of Dr. Octopus and quickly swept away, because the distance between the 2 sides is very short, and at this moment, Pfister has already exerted his peak strength. He has a 90% certainty that this blow will penetrate Dr. Octopus's head. As long as there is no Dr. Octopus at that time, he is confident to solve the many remaining people. At this moment, the time seemed to have completely quieted down. Sphit isolated all influences from the outside world and focused all his attention on this blow. After 0.53 milliseconds, Sphit came to Dr. Octopus, and at 0.75 milliseconds, he instantly raised the laser sword in his hand, and at 0.91 millisecond, the laser sword swung down. And Dr. Octopus finally turned to look at him at this moment. In a second, Dr. Octopus threw a punch and smashed directly on the unsuspecting Sphit's chest. And as his whole body was smashed into the air, his attack naturally failed, and the laser sword almost slid down Dr. Octopus' face. Dr. Octopus even felt the terrifying high temperature on the Aurora sword. But at this moment, these are all meaningless, and Sphit's blow with all his strength is over. Dr. Octopus not only has 4 mechanical tentacles. Even at this moment, it has shown its extremely powerful body strength, which is shocking. The body smashed into the wall heavily, and suddenly the wall was completely shattered and turned into a pile of masonry rubble. A mouthful of blood spurted out of Sphit's mouth, and Sphit looked at Dr. Octopus in disbelief, his eyes full of horror. Is his judgment wrong? The body of Dr. Octopus actually has a powerful power beyond the big one. How can that be? A wave of doubts burst out of his mind, and a mouthful of blood poured out of his mouth again. And Dr. Octopus glanced at Sphit, who was blown away by his punch, with a look of disdain in his eyes. Dr. Octopus is a mad scientist. Once he has identified a certain goal, he will not look back if he fails to achieve his goal, no matter how much he pays for it. In order to be able to transplant the mechanical tentacle and manipulate it flexibly, the latest thing Dr. Octopus has to solve is the problem of the weak human body. If this problem is not solved, then the relationship between him and the mechanical tentacles is like a child swinging a sledgehammer, and sooner or later, he will only hurt himself. So Dr. Octopus chose to strengthen his body to carry mechanical tentacles. And instead of choosing a safe and stable super serum, he chose a human body enhancer full of effects, that is, the human body enhancer that created the Green Goblin. The final strengthening result exceeded everyone's expectations. Although Dr. Octopus's character was affected to a certain extent, there was no second personality, and the specific details were unknown to everyone. But it is precisely because of the human booster that Dr. Octopus transplanted the mechanical tentacles so quickly. So Sphit thought that the body of Dr. Octopus was a weakness, but in fact, the body of Dr. Octopus was not a weakness, on the contrary, it was strong and terrifyingly strong. Just looking at Sphit, who was blown away, Dr. Octopus withdrew his gaze, and then locked his gaze on David, an opponent similar to himself. A cruel smile appeared at the corner of Dr. Octopus' mouth, and the 4 mechanical tentacles suddenly exerted force at this moment. In an instant, David's body slowly approached in the direction of Dr. Octopus. Looking at this scene, this time David was really panicked, and bursts of roars burst out from his mouth. The bony tentacles flashing with halo kept tearing hard, trying to get rid of the entanglement of Dr. Octopus. But how could Dr. Octopus let him go safely? So the hand that controlled the mechanical touch CGCH exploded with more powerful force. Crackling sounds echoed in the air constantly, and David watched as he approached Dr. Octopus little by little. He wants to break free, he wants to fight back, but at this moment he can't resist the power of Dr. Octopus at all. A touch of despair suddenly appeared in his eyes. The short distance of 10 meters between the two has completely become David's passage to death at this moment. When David came to Dr. Octopus, the tentacles behind him were still shaking frantically trying to break free, while the mechanical tentacles behind Dr. Octopus were getting tighter and tighter. With a cold smile on the corner of his mouth, Dr. Octopus didn't mean to speak. Under the influence of the human body enhancer, once he entered the fighting state, his character became extraordinarily brutal. Therefore, there is no villain at all, it is a phenomenon like this for a while. A punch with terrifying power shot out in an instant, heading straight for David's head, simply, neatly, and quickly. David looked at this punch in despair. He wanted to fight back and wanted to fight back, but his bones were completely evacuated. Even if he also copied the power of Dr. Octopus, without the support of the skeleton, it would naturally be impossible to play. Even he himself didn't know that his body had a powerful strength, otherwise he could have reminded SFIT out loud just now. Boom. His thoughts were completely over here, and there was no accident. His head was directly smashed by Dr. Octopus. The whole person can't die in an instant. And SFIT, who was lying in the rubble, watched this scene, especially David's head, like the moment when a watermelon burst. He was suddenly dizzy, his eyes darkened, and he almost fainted. It's over, it's over. There was some silence in his mouth, and Feist's eyes had gradually fallen into a dead silence at this moment. With the death of David, Dr. Octopus will no longer be able to control them, and these super soldiers are just giving food to Dr. Octopus. So when David's head was smashed to pieces, they were doomed. The funny thing is that they clearly came to kill Jin Bing, but from the beginning to the end, they never even met Jin Bing. Even if SFIT knows that there is only a wall between the two sides at the moment, but the wall is like the difference between heaven and earth, so that he will never be able to touch. In S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury looked at the dead David, and his eyes closed immediately. There was not much excess emotion on his face, but the breath on his body became extremely depressed at this moment. All his plans, with the death of David, were completely unsuccessful. In his plans, David should be the best person to drag Jin Bing. But a Dr. Octopus who appeared out of nowhere blocked David abruptly and killed him on the spot. So when David dies, his plan will naturally fail completely, including the 100 super soldiers he has accumulated for a long time, and will completely fall because of this. So this time, he can say that he was stealing chickens without losing money, and he suffered heavy losses. But even so, Fury still did not fail completely. As a wily person, no matter what he does, he likes to lose first, and then win. Therefore, although the current situation is unacceptable, it is also among the possibilities he expected, and he has prepared a last resort for this. And now what makes him hesitant is that once this method is launched, the impact will be too great, too big to bear in his capacity. Is it worth it? For a while, this question kept circling in his mind, making him completely entangled. A little bit of time passed, and the atmosphere in Fury's office was quiet and panicking, watching Dr. Octopus massacre super soldiers on the battlefield. There was an impulse in Fury's heart, and he made a decision in an instant to kill them. Fury's last resort was 3 Tomahawk missiles. Once launched, they could completely destroy the entire Empire State Building. But at the same time, it will also have an inestimable impact. But at this moment, Fury lost his composure, so he was about to issue an order. Just as his order was about to blurt out, a rush of phone rings suddenly rang. It was this burst of phone ringing that interrupted Fury's impulse, and Fury answered the phone subconsciously. The next second, General Ross's voice came from the other end of the phone. "Stop, this is the end of the matter." The voice on General Ross's phone could not hear any emotions, just like a robot without any mood swings. As one of the participants in this event, General Ross can naturally see the live video, and he can also know how many soldiers under his command died. It stands to reason that with his iron-blooded style, such a heavy loss will not only not make him shrink back, but will make him more determined to kill Jinbian, but now he has taken the initiative to ask Fury to stop. Therefore, Fury's thoughts suddenly turned quickly, and the next sentence blurted out directly from Fury's mouth, "Who intervened, Congress? Parliament, or your military?" As soon as these words came out, General Ross on the other end of the phone fell into silence. As soon as these words came out, Fury on the other end of the phone suddenly breathed tight, his fists clenched together suddenly, and the expression on his face was wonderful. Nickel Charlie, the real power lieutenant general of the military, is also the immediate boss of General Ross. Its status is in the entire military, and there are very few people who can compare with it. It is a big man who really stomps his feet, and the entire Star-Striped Federation will be shocked. It is no wonder that General Ross, who has always been known for his iron-blooded wrist, would give in directly to the order given by such a character. Even if the entire shield is in front of this boss, it has to submit to his orders at this moment. At the moment, Fury's tone was a little heavy. "I understand, I will stop the action immediately." Hearing this, General Ross on the other end of the phone didn't say anything and hung up the phone. And Fury looked at the few remaining super soldiers in the surveillance video, and his heart ached suddenly, and he quickly dialed Jin Bing's phone. In Jin Bing's office, when Jin Bing's phone on his desk rang, Richard, who was looking at the surveillance screen, suddenly turned his head and glanced at the phone on the table, and then at Jin Bing, thinking in his heart suddenly a thought came to mind, the matter is over. Sure enough, when Kim picked up the phone, Richard saw the phone note Nick Fury for the first time. Suddenly there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes, and he immediately turned his ears to listen. The opponent at the moment actually called, and Richard wanted to hear what Fury wanted to say. As the call was connected, Fury's calm voice suddenly came out of the phone. "Good trick, I underestimated you, the matter is over, let my people withdraw." Hearing this, Jin Bing, who had been sitting firmly on the Daoyutai, suddenly had a bright light in his eyes. "If you do something wrong, you have to pay the price. The lives of these people are your tuition fees." Domineering words spit out from Jin Bing's mouth, and Jin Bing rejected Fury's request in one go. Fury on the other end of the phone was silent for a while. Although he couldn't see his expression at the moment, it was obvious that he must be extremely aggrieved at this moment. But as a loser, no matter how suffocated he is, he can only endure it. At the moment, Fury gritted his teeth and said, "SFIT stays with me, and I will pay another price that you are satisfied with to redeem his life." This time, Jin did not refuse again. Since Fury was willing to pay the price for an insignificant role, Jin naturally didn't mind exchanging his life for some benefits. "It is good." After agreeing, Jin didn't say any more, just hung up the phone, and then turned to look at Richard. Suddenly, a clear expression appeared on Richard's face. He heard the content of the phone call just now, so naturally he didn't need to repeat it. But what surprised him was that his cheap old man seemed to be hiding a little deep. For this reason, Richard has already made plans to run away, but now Fury has taken the initiative to call and surrender. Apparently, Kim didn't seem to do anything, but in fact he had already made all the preparations. He might even hook up with someone who has hands and eyes. Otherwise, with Fury's temperament, no matter how powerful Jin Bing is, it is impossible to yield. "My heart is full of curiosity, but now is not the time to explore." Richard raised his legs and walked out of the office. There are not many people left outside, and the person Fury wants has already been beaten by Dr. Octopus. Half dead, if Richard doesn't go out again, he will be really cold. And this kind of thing can only go to Richard, and neither Daniel nor Peter can replace it, because neither of them can order Dr. Octopus. The door of the office was opened, and Richard walked in the corridor with steady steps, with an elegant smile on the corner of his mouth, ignoring the death scene at the scene, looking like a gentleman who walked out of hell. "Stop." When Richard's crisp voice sounded, his voice suddenly spread to everyone's ears. This is a small skill after the strong mental power. Even on a chaotic battlefield, it can be clearly heard by everyone. Own voice. Immediately, Jin Bing's guards all stopped their movements, and stood in place. The originally fierce and mighty Dr. Octopus stopped what he was doing in an instant after hearing Richard's voice. Turning his head and looking behind him, he saw Richard, who was out of tune with the battlefield. At the moment, everyone saw that Dr. Octopus, who was originally supported by the mechanical tentacles in the air, slowly restrained the power emanating from his body at this moment, and his body also landed from the air to the ground, came to Richard, and bowed respectfully. "Boss." Hearing this, Richard nodded at Dr. Octopus with satisfaction, and said in a rare praise, "Good job." As soon as these words came out, the coldness on Dr. Octopus' face disappeared instantly, replaced by a somewhat happy face. Apparently Richard's compliments were very useful to him. And casually boasting about Dr. Octopus, Richard's eyes suddenly turned to the group of super soldiers. There were originally 100 super soldiers, but now there are only 10 left. And among these 10 people, all of them were injured, the most serious of which was SFIT, who had a big hole pierced through his stomach. His face was extremely pale, and he had obviously stepped into the gate of death with one foot. If it weren't for the injection of super serum, the power of regeneration was hanging his breath, and he would have died in his current state. And even if there is barely a breath left, if the battle continues, death is only a matter of time. "You, come with me." Richard pointed at SFIT, and SFIT was stunned for a moment, not knowing what Richard wanted to do. Although he doesn't know Richard's identity, it can be seen from the attitude of Dr. Octopus that Richard is definitely the person in charge here. So despite Richard's young age, SFIT simply ignored it. After a little hesitation, SFIT finally raised his leg and walked towards Richard. Shrugging his body, he came to Richard. SFIT opened his mouth slightly, wanting to say something, but Richard didn't give him a chance to speak, so he turned and left. At the same time, SFIT also felt the cold eyes of Dr. Octopus looking at him, and his heart trembled, and quickly followed Richard's footsteps. In this way, he broke away from the battle group in an instant, and also escaped the doom of death. And just after the two left their front feet, the next second, a scream came from behind SFIT. At the moment, SFIT looked back suddenly, and saw that his teammates were instantly slaughtered by Dr. Octopus, and the blood directly stained the ground. Such a scene suddenly made Svit's eyes red, and he looked at the battlefield with split eyes, and shouted loudly, "Stop!" Unfortunately, no one paid any attention to him, and in the end he could only watch his last teammates fall. For a time, he, who had always shed blood but not tears, suddenly burst into tears in his eyes. With a confused expression on his face, he murmured to himself, "Why? Aren't you going to subdue us? Why are you still poisoning?" Apparently, SFIT thought Kim was planning to subdue their group, so he left his teammates and followed Richard, intending to find a way out for them. But now it turns out that it was just wishful thinking on his part. At this moment, Richard's original figure reappeared beside him, looking at him with intestines hanging from his stomach. A trace of disgust flashed in Richard's eyes. "Go back if you want to die, and I'll let them give you a ride." Hearing Richard's voice, SFIT suddenly raised his head and looked closely at Richard's words. Why save me? Not them." While speaking, Svit's tone gradually became angry. And Richard couldn't help laughing after listening to it. "It's very simple. Someone paid for your life, but no one bought them, so you live them to death. Also, don't talk to me in this tone next time. This is the first time, for the sake of you still selling money. I don't care about you, but next time, I'll screw you off brain," Richard said with a smile on his face, his tone full of calmness, while Svit's expression froze after getting the answer, and the whole person seemed a little unacceptable. Seeing this, Richard suddenly said something meaningful. "Do you know who bought you?" SFIT shook his head subconsciously. Richard gave the answer in an instant. "Of course it's your director, but it's a pity that there are so many people. He only buys one of you, and the rest will naturally be worthless, so you should just kill them so you don't waste food alive." Quote. After speaking, Richard let out a chuckle, turned and walked into the office, leaving only Svit's eyes blankly sitting there. Of course what Richard said just now was not in vain, although he didn't know why Fury valued SFIT so much, because he had never heard of the name. But it doesn't matter. Richard doesn't mind sticking a thorn in Svit's heart. He may not see anything for a while, but in the future, there will always be a time when this thorn will work. As for whether SFIT will act according to Richard's ideas, Richard doesn't know, but he is half sure. And this half of the assurance comes from the fact that SFIT is a man of love, which can be seen from his performance just now. This type of person thinks completely different from ordinary people, because he can't bear his teammates dying in front of him because of his affection, and because of his affection, he can't bear the practice of Director Fury only saving him. That's why Richard chatted with him and told him the truth. In addition, now this is his most emotional time, so Fury rescued him not only did not gain his gratitude, but made him hate it. Richard is naturally willing to do this kind of unfunded business that can bury a nail in the opponent with just a few words. In the end, with the death of this group of super soldiers, the people who invaded the Emperor's mansion this time only survived a total of 1 SFIT. As for the rest, they all died in the building. Back in the office, Richard walked to the sofa and smiled. It's over. What should you all do? Daniel, find someone to clean up the building. Little Spider, go back and see Aunt May, too. Let's go. After speaking, Richard waved his hand and told them to get out of the way. In this regard, the two naturally have no objection, and they can see that Richard is deliberately sending them away. But if you see through it without saying it, the two of them will naturally not be too brainless to say this, and immediately got up and left the office. For a while, only Richard and Jin Bing were left in the office, and Richard couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer, and asked directly. What the hell is going on here? I said why you were so calm from beginning to end. It turned out that you had already arranged the next move. Let's talk about it. Seeing Richard's eager look, Jin Bing's brows slightly raised, a smile instantly evoked the corner of his mouth, and the majestic color on his face disappeared immediately. Since the attack and killing incident, Richard quickly became mature and never acted like a spoiled brat in front of him again, which made Jin Bing a little disappointed. Now, although Richard didn't act like a spoiled child, the look of anticipation in his eyes still made Jin Bing very useful, and he didn't hesitate to tell the whole story directly. As an underground emperor, Jin not only holds a powerful force, but also naturally has the shadow of the Star Stripe Federation behind him. Otherwise, if you want to become the underground emperor of New York City and sit on this throne for many years, how can it be possible without the support of the Stars and Stripes Federation? You must know that before Jin Bing, New York City was never unified by anyone, and it was not until Jin Bing was born that the feat of unifying New City was completed. However, although there are people from the Star and Stripes Federation behind Jin Bing, it is not the entire Star and Stripes Federation, just a part of them. Therefore, since Jin Bing came to power, it has delivered huge benefits to these people, and it has made the relationship between the two parties more reliable. But it also caused some people's dissatisfaction. That is the political enemy of those who support Jin Bing. And this time, the conflict between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Jin Bing seems to be their own business, but it is also a game between two political groups. The political group on the side of S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to use the hand of S.H.I.E.L.D. to overthrow the underground emperor dynasty of Jin Bing and weaken the strength of their opponents. For those who support Jin Bing, it is naturally impossible for this situation to happen, so after the two sides do not know how many times they fought openly and secretly, this battle finally happened. Therefore, tonight's battle seems to be a battle between Jin and S.H.I.E.L.D., but it is actually a game between the top of the Star-Spangled Federation, with the help of both of them. And now, it's clear that Kim won, so the people behind him are starting to wrap things up, and that's when Fury calls to compromise. And all the consequences of what happened tonight are also settled by them. After listening to Jin Bing's remarks, Richard's eyes were full of brilliance. He had faintly noticed that something was wrong before. How could Jin Bing not do anything and just wait for S.H.I.E.L.D.? After doing it for a long time, there is still such a reason behind it. Suddenly, Richard couldn't help but sigh that Jin Bing's influence was far beyond his imagination. At the same time, Richard also realized at this moment that the reason why Jin Bian waited for S.H.I.E.L.D. to come to the door with great fanfare, I am afraid not only because of the backers behind him, but also because Jin Bian needs to stand up through this matter. Simply put, it is to brighten the muscles. In this era of cannibalism, if you want to truly gain a firm foothold, you can only show strong strength. If Jin Bing was defeated by S.H.I.E.L.D. tonight, Richard believed that the current situation would definitely be different. But things don't if. Jin and Wan stepped on the body of Shield and Wan and declared his strength to the world. The 4,000 elite soldiers and the 100 super soldiers are the proof. Against the background of these people, Jin Bing showed off his muscles fiercely. As a result, the 26 hostile forces behind Jin Bing would definitely not target Jin Bing at will, unless they were absolutely sure. And in addition to these things, Richard also thought of the far-reaching consequences of this event. But these are inconsequential things, at least for now. Losers are treated as losers, and winners are treated as winners. Although it is impossible for the loser to take all, and the winner to take all, as a winner, Kim Biao still reaped huge benefits. The purchase rights of various special materials, the purchase rights of some high-precision scientific research instruments, and the life-saving money given by Fury, all the information about the new laser sword of S.H.I.E.L.D. These things seem to be just a pile of paper materials, but if they are placed outside, even if the price is hundreds of billions, there will be people willing to pay. It can be seen that Jin and this time have a great harvest. Richard didn't pay much attention to these things. Since the battle last night, he returned home and slept until dawn. When I woke up the next morning, my whole body was relieved. And Richard didn't rush to get up, but opened the system panel. A flash of excitement flashed on his face. Main quest: The Dark Alliance. Explanation: there is no limit to how to form your own alliance. The strong person is not only powerful, but also has several powerful subordinates. This task is a long-term task. Reward: every time you join a system-approved member of the Dark Alliance, you will be rewarded with a lottery. Congratulations, you conquered Spider-Man, the reward has been issued, please check it yourself. Mission: The Darkening of Superheroes. Stage 2. Thoroughly guide Spider-Man into the dark. Explanation: spiders will be stronger in the dark. Reward: 1 draw. Task completed. Character attributes panel. Name: Richard Fisk. Age: 9 years old. Status: son of Wilson Fisker. Skills: Ninja Core, Claw Core, Giant Shadow Core, Sheep Charm, Snake Charm, Dragon Charm. Items: none. Sweepstakes: twice. Members of the Dark Alliance: Dr. Octopus, Spider-Man. Looking at the series of data refreshed by the system, Richard's mouth was crooked with a smile. He drew 2 lottery prizes and lay quietly in the character attributes. When he thought about it, Richard was full of excitement. Even though this was the first time, he didn't know how many times the lottery was drawn, each time was a brand new one for him. These rewards, Richard had already obtained after Peter successfully joined the Dark Alliance, but Richard did not choose to draw them at that time, but kept them. It was originally a backup prepared just in case, but now, since the matter is over, then I can happily draw the lottery again. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Richard's mind immediately issued an order. Lottery. After about a minute of waiting, the system's icy electronic synth sounded. Ding, congratulations, you have drawn the chicken charm. Hearing this, Richard immediately waved his fist excitedly, and the whole person almost couldn't help shouting. Flying in the flesh and flying in the air has always been the dream of mankind, and Richard is no exception. There are many superheroes in Marvel, but there are very few who can achieve physical flight and achieve physical flight. Therefore, Richard is very satisfied with this wave of draws. After being excited for a while, Richard finally calmed down and started the second round of the lottery again. It is still the familiar prelude, 1 minute of waiting time, and then the system's icy electronic synthesizer announces the result. And when Richard saw the results of the lottery this time, he was stunned for a moment, and then a touch of ecstasy rose from the bottom of his heart. Richard felt that he must have slept with Lady Luck last night, otherwise why would he be so lucky? Ding, congratulations, you have drawn the rabbit charm. Among the 12 charms, which 2 charms are the best match, it must be the chicken charm and the rabbit charm. The chicken charm represents volley flight, while the rabbit charm represents extreme speed. But now the 2 are added together, and Richard feels that he can circle the atmosphere in 10 seconds. Of course that's an exaggeration, but Richard should feel no worse. At this moment, a thought moved in Richard's mind, and the character attribute panel appeared in front of him again. Character attributes panel. Name: Richard Fisk. Age: 9 years old. Status: son of Wilson Fisker. Skills: Ninja Core, Claw Core, Giant Shadow Core, sheep charm, snake charm, dragon 503 charm, chicken charm, rabbit charm. Items: none. Sweepstakes, twice. Members of the Dark Alliance, Dr. Octopus, Spider-Man. Chapter 51. Looking at the luxurious data of the skill, Richard was completely inflated, and silently felt the power surging in his body. Suddenly, Richard's figure flashed, and his figure disappeared instantly, and without Richard's existence, the quilt naturally fell down slowly. But before the quilt fell, Richard appeared on the bed again. Not only that, but he was holding a breakfast at the moment. Freshly baked fruit salad, and sandwiches with cream cake. According to the normal speed, it takes 10 to 15 minutes to prepare such a breakfast. Even for a normal person to increase the speed to the extreme, and in the case of guaranteeing no mistakes, it still takes at least 7 minutes. But now, in less than a second, Richard has already made a breakfast by himself, lying comfortably in his bed, enjoying his craft. It didn't taste very good, but Richard ate it with relish, probably because he was in a good mood. At New York City Airport, Jin Bing and Richard, one big and one small, stood in the crowd of people at the airport and looked so eye-catching. Jin Bing is tall and burly, with a flat face. Even if he just stands there, he makes the surrounding pedestrians shy away. And Richard, with a smile on his face, soft blonde hair, blue eyes, and a small white suit, looks like an angel. Now standing side by side with Jin, a strange landscape is formed, a combination of angels and demons. Many people's eyes, both overtly and secretly, focused on Richard, and their eyes were filled with the light of admiration. If it wasn't for Jin and standing by Richard's side, Richard might have been surrounded by a group of girls at this moment. Now that a week has passed since the last incident, all the disturbances have basically subsided. Under the restraint of fury, the shield completely died down and fell silent. In this battle, shield not only lost its prestige, but even became a stepping stone for Jin Bing, especially in terms of face. Throw away. For this, fury is also very clear, so shield has completely become low-key and completely disappeared from the sight of the outside world. And in the same way, as another executor of this matter, General Ross also paid the price. After all, for the death of 4,000 soldiers, someone naturally needs to be responsible for this, and this person can never be Jin Ning, who is the victor, so it can only be General Ross, who has been hiding in the dark. Because of this, the power in General Ross's hands has been cut by half. Although the troops can still be mobilized, it is no longer realistic to imagine that 4,000 soldiers can be mobilized at will. And with the silence of these two opponents, Jin Bing's reputation has become more and more prosperous. Not only did the people behind him support him even more, but also in the underground world of the entire Star-Striped Federation, Jin Bing's prestige has also increased more than before. After all, his stepping stone this time is the famous shield and a real power general. Against such a strong supporting role, Jin Bing's prestige has grown tremendously, which has become a matter of course. And in the whole thing, Richard's role was completely covered up by Kim. This is not what Jin did voluntarily, but what Richard voluntarily requested. As the saying goes, the wood is beautiful in the forest, and the wind will destroy it. Besides, Richard doesn't need an outside name to prove himself now, so even though Richard has done a lot of things, he is still not famous. Except for a few people, no one in the outside world knows about him. His son, Richard Fisk, is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Of course, the impact of this event is not only good, but also bad. And the biggest impact was caused by the dead Colonel Rhodes in the whole incident. Colonel Rhodes is not only an elite commander, but also the chairman of Stark Industries Group and a friend of Tony Stark. Stark Industries is an arms company and one of the giants of the Star and Stripe Federation Arms Group, with a market value of tens of billions of dollars. In the Star-Stripe Federation, where capital is king, such a powerful capital force, even the Star-Stripe Federation, must be afraid. As one of Tony's few friends, the death of Colonel Rhodes caused a great shock to Tony, the playboy, and immediately became angry. Because of being rich, Tony is defiant. Because of being rich, Tony plays life. But also because of the wealth, the friendship that is within reach for ordinary people is precious to Tony. So you can imagine how angry Tony was when he heard the news of his friend's death. However, since the news of this matter has been blocked, Tony only knows that Colonel Rhodes is dead, but he does not know who died. However, as far as he is concerned, it is only a matter of time to find out the beginning and end of this matter. As for these things, neither Jin Bing nor Richard paid any attention to it, or even paid no attention to this matter at all. It was not that they ignored Tony. But when an elephant steps on an ant, will it seriously check the identity of the ant? Obviously, elephants don't, so Jin Bing and Richard naturally don't care what the surnames of the fallen soldiers are, so they ignore the impact in this regard. Hearing the sound of the flight landing on the radio in the airport lobby, Jin and Richard's eyes fell on the entrance and exit of the airport for the first time. Now that the matter is over, Vanessa, who was sent out by their father and son, will naturally be brought back. Originally, Vanessa planned to stay in the flower country for 2 more days, because she signed up for a chef training class there, which seems to be called New Oriental. As a result, they were unanimously opposed by Jin and father and son, urging Vanessa to come back quickly. It wasn't for any special reason, but the two of them hadn't eaten much for several days. One of them is the emperor of the underground world, and the other is the controller of the Shadow Corps, but do you imagine that their 3 meals a day are bread and salad? Occasionally make a steak, and the result is either burnt or undercooked. So they can be said to miss Vanessa very much. Finally, under the eyes of the two, Vanessa's tall figure appeared in front of them. Holding the suitcase in her hand, she was wearing a beige windbreaker and a pair of sunglasses on her face. From the corners of her slightly raised mouth, it could be seen that Vanessa was in a very good mood, especially when she saw Jin and Richard. After that, a happy smile appeared on his face. Diaresis, hey, Wilson, Richard, here I am, West. Looking at Vanessa, who was waving to say hello, Richard and Jin looked at each other and smiled, and at the same time made a relieved look, and walked towards Vanessa quickly. At this moment, the movements of the two of them are extremely synchronized, and the walking posture is also very handsome. For a time, it attracted many people around. However, when they saw Jin and the two come to Vanessa, one held Vanessa in his arms, and the other held Vanessa's hand, I don't know how many people were instantly heartbroken. You know, although Richard's attention is a lot, Jin Bing's attention is not low at all. In this country that advocates muscles, with his burly body, I don't know how many hot girls swallow saliva. And now, both the little angel and this burly demon are all surrounded by a woman, and I don't know how many people are envious, jealous, and hateful. And Vanessa, who was in it, didn't notice it at all, and unknowingly he has become the public enemy of all women at the airport. At this moment, she only has the joy of seeing her husband and children. Other than that, she has no other thoughts. With the return of Vanessa, Kim and Richard finally got rid of the embarrassment of daily milk and bread, and their little days returned to their previous appearance. Richard went to class on time, Kim would go out to the Emperor building every day to deal with things, and Vanessa also had her own work to do. The family of 3 looked busy and warm, and lived a peaceful and fulfilling life. But in this world, there has never been peace, and neither is it now. Rambo Building, located in Queens, although it does not belong to the atmosphere of the city center, it is also called prosperous. On the top floor of the Rambo Building, 3 men and 1 woman are slowly waking up. One man has white temples and 3-dimensional features. He can be called a handsome uncle. This man's name is Reed Richards. He is a genius scientist. He has been known as a child prodigy since he was a child. He has graduated from major colleges and universities and obtained many doctorates. He is an uncompromising scholar. And the only woman among the 4, named Susan Storm, is both Reed's assistant and Reed's girlfriend. As for the remaining handsome white youth and a burly middle-aged man, they are Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm. One of them is Susan's younger brother, and the other is Reed's friend. Reed has been working on cosmic storms for a long time, and made amazing progress half a month ago. In order to obtain further data, Reed gathered a few people and planned to take a spaceship to the universe and observe the cosmic storm in person. But unfortunately, this plan was not supported by the Stars and Stripes Federation, and the budget given to them has been reduced again and again. Fortunately, Reed met his college classmate and friend, Victor Von Dohm, with the help of sufficient financial support, so that he was able to rush out of the Earth, go to space, and observe the cosmic storm up close. However, due to Reed's mistake, the speed of the cosmic storm was incorrectly calculated, so that cosmic rays directly enveloped the 4 of them together with the spacecraft. In the end, they managed to escape from the dead and regain their lives, but because of this, they completely fell into a coma. Until now, they woke up on the top floor of the Rambo building. Looking at the familiar environment around him, Lita's eyes gradually changed from blurred to rational. But when his eyes fell on himself, Reed's expression changed instantly. "Oh, Ben, what's wrong with you?" This remark also quickly attracted the attention of Susan and Johnny. Immediately, the two of them turned their heads to look at Ben subconsciously, and when they saw Ben's appearance clearly, a look of extreme surprise appeared on people's faces at the same time. "Oh my God, what the hell is going on? What is going on? God, I'm not dreaming, how is this possible?" The brothers and sisters said loudly in amazement, and the reaction of everyone also made Grimm's face change instantly. He raised his palm subconsciously, wanting to take the mirror again, but when a palm made of rock appeared in front of him, Grimm's expression suddenly froze. Looking down at his body, he saw that his whole body was covered with rock-like muscles at this moment. And the rocks here are not adjectives, but really. As for his appearance, Grimm naturally couldn't accept it, and the whole person was a little angry at the moment. "Why did I become like this? Why are you all intact?" Hearing this questioning, Reed fell silent. As the initiator and organizer of this operation, he needs to take full responsibility for such a thing. Before he could figure out how to explain it to Grimm, Johnny suddenly stood up angrily and roared, "I've said this before, this is not reliable, and none of you listen to me. Yes, now it has become like this." Johnny shouted angrily, and his eyes fell directly on Reed, which was full of anger. Just then, boom, a burst of flame suddenly burned on Johnny's body, and the whole process appeared without warning. In an instant, the temperature in the room began to rise rapidly, and the eyes of Reed and Susan became even more astonished. Even Grimm, who was immersed in his own world, was taken aback by Johnny at the moment. His eyes flickered as his eyes, showing his uneasy mood. One Johnny, one Grimm, both of them showed their abilities beyond ordinary people. Thinking of this, Reed looked at Susan after being surprised. And Susan also realized something when she looked at Reed's eyes, and immediately nodded slightly at Reed. The whole person held her breath, and quickly focused. Suddenly, under everyone's attention, Susan disappeared, and disappeared without a trace in a short moment. And this time, the emotions on everyone's faces were no longer shocked, but a faint trace of numbness. The three people in a row have shown the ability to surpass mortals. The three of them are not fools. They know that there must be unknown changes in them. In addition to everything they have encountered in the universe, all of this is very likely to be a cosmic storm, caused. Immediately, the three of them set their sights on Reed. As a genius scientist who has been working on the study of cosmic storms and genetic theory, if anyone in this world knows about cosmic storms, it must be Reed. So they all hope that Reed can come up with a solution, and Reed also said that he will do his best to help them restore their original appearance, which calmed them down temporarily. A cosmic storm caused 4 ordinary people to disappear in New York City, and 4 extraordinary people were added, and the future of New York City suddenly became more and more exciting. There is a heavily guarded underground conference room, which is just an abandoned warehouse on the surface, but in fact, it is an important stronghold of Hell's Kitchen. And today is a big day for Hell's Kitchen, so everyone present looked very solemn. Hell's Kitchen has existed in New York City for a long time. Since most of the forces were wiped out by Jin Bian, it has changed from light to dark, and is led by the 4 giants. Not long ago, David Thompson, one of the 4 giants, died at the hands of Richard. The news on the road was that Jin and his men were killed, and when this matter was confirmed, David Thompson's power was immediately divided up by the other 3 giants. Although the 3 giants have thus obtained a huge increase in strength and the strength of their subordinates has increased a lot, the 3 of them are very difficult to be happy. Jin Bing is a big mountain pressing on their heads, pressing them down, making them breathless. Even David Thompson, who was one of the 4 giants with them, was killed by Jin Bing's men. Who knows when he will follow in the footsteps of David Thompson. Therefore, David's death has sounded the alarm for the 3 giants alive in Hell's Kitchen. If they continue like this, they will die at the hands of Jin Bing sooner or later. Therefore, after rounds of contact and negotiation, the 3 giants of Hell's Kitchen finally reached an agreement to completely integrate the remaining forces in Hell's Kitchen, and this meeting was born. At this time in the conference room, Wilson Martin and Daniel Taylor were already sitting in the conference room. Only Vickers Jinfin remained, who still did not arrive. The meeting room was quiet for a while, and neither of the two spoke, but waited quietly. Finally, after about 10 minutes, a sound of footsteps came from outside the door of the conference room. The door of the conference room opened in the next second, and Vickers Jinfin pushed in directly, but he was not alone, and beside him, followed by a white man who looked a little simple and honest. Seeing the appearance of the two, Wilson and Taylor frowned instantly, and their cold and ruthless eyes swept across Vickers' body and focused on the simple and honest white man. As the two bosses frowned, the atmosphere in the conference room also changed, becoming extraordinarily heavy and depressing. "Who is he?" Taylor said solemnly. At this time, his eyes were full of fierce light, and his eyes turned from the white man to Vickers. As long as Vickers' answer could not satisfy him, he immediately got up and left, and would never stay for a while. Second. The same was true for Wilson, who, although he did not speak, stood beside Taylor to show his support for Taylor. No wonder the two of them reacted like this, it was because they were forced by Jin over the years. Jin has never given up his plan to clean up the remnants of Hell's Kitchen, so there are countless spies who have sneaked into Hell's Kitchen over the years. This makes Hell's Kitchen full of vigilance against all strangers. Not to mention today's meeting, Vickers hastily brought an unfamiliar face over. If this person is a person from Jin Bing, wouldn't they be sure to die? So in the face of his own life, no matter how vigilant it is not too much. Seeing the reaction of the two, Vickers slowly showed a smile on his face. "Two guys, calm down, believe me, he is definitely not someone from Jin Bing. Char, let's say hello to everyone." The last sentence was obviously aimed at the simple and honest white man. After listening to Vickers' words, the white man nodded to the two of Taylor with a smile on his face, and then introduced himself. "My name is Charles Garcia, and I'm currently working for the Federal Intelligence Service. But don't worry, I'm not from the Stars and Stripes Federation. On behalf of Hydra, I greet you both, good afternoon." As soon as the words fell, the expressions of Taylor and Wilson changed at the same time, and their eyes collided instantly, and they both noticed the surprise in the other's eyes. They had guessed about Char's various identities, but the only thing they didn't think about was that Char was actually a member of Hydra. Hydra, a terrorist organization across the world, the leader of the Red Skull, once led the Hydra during World War II, setting off a monstrous wave. At that time, the Hydra was in glory. Whether it was strength or power, it was the best in the world. They wanted to dominate the world, and they even almost succeeded. But it is a pity that Captain America turned out in the end, and various countries began to jointly target Hydra, and finally completely drove Hydra from glory to dust. Katakana middle dot 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 katakana middle dot. But even so, the Hydra has only declined temporarily. They are like poisonous snakes hiding in a dark corner, silently putting away their fangs, waiting for the opportunity to rise again. Therefore, after learning the identity of Charles in front of him, Taylor and Wilson's brows not only did not loosen, but they wrinkled even tighter. "Vickers, what do you mean? You brought a Hydra, do you want us to join the Hydra as a whole in Hell's Kitchen? If so, then I will not accompany you." Taylor showed his attitude for the first time and was ready to leave at any time. Hydra is powerful and true, but the situation of Hydra is obviously worse than Hell's Kitchen. It can be called a mouse crossing the street, everyone shouts and beats it. In contrast, the current Hell's Kitchen was only suppressed by Jin, and he did not want to be suppressed by all the forces after joining Hydra. Just after he finished speaking, without waiting for Vickers to answer, Char, who had a smile on his face, said in a natural tone, "Hey, man, calm down, I'm here to work with you today, not for you to join Jutu. Snake. I think you should need help now, don't you? Otherwise, what if you integrate all the forces of Hell's Kitchen? Is this enough to fight Jinbian? So you need foreign aid, what do you think?" Charles spoke slowly, but what he said made several people present unable to refute. Hell's Kitchen was crippled by Jin Bian at its peak, and now there is a group of water dogs left, so what if they unite? Seeing that the expressions on the faces of the three people gradually changed, Charlton smiled. Since the defeat of the Hydra during World War II, in order to maintain its vitality, the Hydra has invaded all countries and penetrated into various key departments, among which the Star and Stripe Federation is the most. And for these people, the countries are not polite, they just waved their hands and took them all down. Just because most of the members of Hydra are elite talents, and in the face of talents, there is no reason for governments of various countries to abandon them. In addition, they were in a war period at the time, which made them eager to improve their own strength, so the importance of talents became even more prominent. Today, although Hydra is a terrorist organization in name, basically all the core members of Hydra have been mixed into the governments of various countries and are in high positions. While they turned the Hydra into a terrorist organization, the thief shouted to catch the thief, it can be said that they played very smoothly. 707. And a few days ago, the confrontation between Jin Bing and S.H.I.E.L.D., the people of Hydra naturally knew about it. Originally, they thought that Jin and would be uprooted under the attack of S.H.I.E.L.D., but they were all ready to devour the benefits after Jin and fell. But who would have thought that the development of things was completely beyond their expectations, and the famous S.H.I.E.L.D. actually lost to Jin Bing, which is really a great irony. It also made Hydra's plan to fail. To this end, Hydra has a whole new idea, and wants to cooperate with Jin and, of course, it is best to let Jin and join them. But unfortunately, their people didn't even see Jin Bing's face, so they were kicked out. The people of Hydra were very annoyed by this, but they had no choice but to do anything. Now they are carrying the gold and the victory, they are not going to move when they want to. Therefore, the people of Hydra have already planned to give up. After all, for them, one more gold is not much, and one less gold is not much. But just when the people of Hydra were about to give up, a piece of news spread at some point. This news was very simple, and it listed everything Jin he had in his hands. Super serum, body enhancer, green goblin armor, flying skateboard. Before, due to various reasons, Jin Bing had these things in his hands, but they were not known by outsiders, only a few people knew about it. But now, as this news spreads, it spreads all over the upper class of New York City in an instant, letting everyone know that Jin Bing has something in his hands that can change the world. Immediately, the Hydra, who had planned to give up, was like a jackal that smelled meat, and completely set his sights on Jin Bing. After the lessons of S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra already knew that there was a powerful political force behind Jin Bing. It is basically impossible to officially shake Jin Bian. So they can only find another way to support an organization and fight with Jin. Completely disrupt the situation in New York City, so that Hydra will have the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. Therefore, after some investigation, Hell's Kitchen entered Hydra's line of sight, and this was the scene where Char appeared here. Looking at the three people who were silent at the scene, Charles enjoyed the feeling of controlling the situation. He moved his footsteps and quickly came to the main seat of the conference room and sat down. He leaned back on the chair and looked at the three tailors who were present. What are the three of you thinking about? Do you want to cooperate with us? I believe that with our help, you will not only no longer have to live in a dark corner, but you will even have the opportunity to bring Hell's Kitchen back to its peak. There are not many such opportunities. Quote. Char's words did not have any incitement, but one thing was highlighted in his words, and that was reality. The cold reality forced the three of Taylor to face it, and they were also unwilling to live in the sewers all the time. So at this moment, the three of Taylor finally let go. How are we going to cooperate? Hearing this, Charlton laughed. It's very simple, you just need to make Jin and devastated. Let him focus all his attention on you. Don't worry about danger, with our help, Jin can't help you. In the face of Char's unreasonable condition, after a little thought, the three of them nodded in agreement. So far, Hell's Kitchen and Hydra have completely colluded with each other. In a blink of an eye, 3 days have passed, and Richard stared out the window blankly, not listening at all to what the teacher said on the podium. By now, Richard has become accustomed to such a life. Without the pressure of life, the wind and frost of the years have faded away, and the only thing left is comfort and comfort. Even just sitting in a daze in the classroom, at this moment, in Richard's view, it has completely become a kind of enjoyment. After the get out of class bell rang and the teacher walked out of the office, the classroom was buzzing with excitement. And Monica, who was sitting next to Richard, came over immediately, with an excited smile on her face and a mobile phone in her hand. "Look, Richard, the new superheroes, they're so handsome." Monica's excited words brought Richard back to his senses immediately and looked at the cell phone that Monica held in front of him. The above is a news report about a bridge in New York City. There was a car accident today. When a bus was about to fall into the river, several superheroes suddenly appeared and saved the bus. As far as the story is concerned, there is nothing new in this story, but the 4 characters of superhero have firmly caught the attention of the public. It is well known that the people of New York City have many disasters, so for superheroes, everyone worships them. Just like Peter before, he gained huge fame as soon as he debuted. And now, Peter has completely shed his superhero aura because of the previous incident, which makes the citizens of New York City feel as if there is an empty space in their hearts. Therefore, when new superheroes appear, they naturally gain greater exposure and more support. But these things are naturally not Richard's focus. At this moment, he looked at a few photos on his phone and felt a vague sense of familiarity. At the same time, his brows involuntarily moved slightly. Soon a burst of related memories emerged in Richard's mind: The Thing, Human Torch, Invisible Woman, Mr. Fantastic, Fantastic Four. In the last life, Richard only saw the poster of this film, but didn't see it in detail, so he didn't remember it for the first time. Right now, after finally retrieving this information in his mind, Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. The appearance of the Fantastic Four reminded Richard of his main quest of the Dark Alliance. Do you want to try and fool a few members from the Fantastic Four? While thinking about it, Richard rubbed his chin like a little adult. But soon, Richard gave up on this idea. Superheroes like the Fantastic Four are team-based at first glance. If you want them to join the Dark Alliance, you must pull them together, otherwise even if 1 or 2 of them are successfully blackened, they may return to the light at any time under the influence of the other 2. Such a time-consuming, labor-intensive, and risky thing is really not worth doing. Of course, the main reason is because Richard has no impression of them, so his desire to blacken them is not as strong as Peter's. Compared with these righteous heroes, those villains are much more foolish. But who is the villain of the Fantastic Four? Suddenly, Richard's mind went blank. He had no impression at all, and he could only give up the idea of taking the initiative. Anyway, since the superhero has appeared, the villain will definitely emerge as the times require. It doesn't matter if you don't know now, you can naturally find it with the superhero at that time. Richard gave up the idea of actively looking for trouble, but he didn't know that trouble soon found his head. Facing the superpowers they acquired at first, the Fantastic Four all felt overwhelmed, especially Grimm. Because among the 4, only his appearance has changed, and even his wife no longer recognizes him. However, as they rescued the bus, received cheers from everyone present, and praised by the major mainstream media the next day, everyone seemed to have found the meaning of their existence, and no longer resisted their own abilities but start active research and development. Especially Johnny, as the youngest guy among the 4, it is when he is impulsive and curious, especially when he is praised and recognized by everyone, it makes him addicted to it. Therefore, they who were in a hurry to change back to their original state suddenly became no longer anxious, but began to walk in the city, acting as superheroes, preventing crime after scene. Every time they will be praised and screamed by people, which greatly satisfies their vanity. For a time, the Fantastic Four were the limelight of the entry and exit, and the daily headlines were basically related to them. And just when they were in the limelight, the people of Hell's Kitchen began to stare at them. Since the cooperation with Hydra, the forces of Hell's Kitchen suddenly expanded like a balloon. Not only the equipment in hand is updated, but also equipped with a series of high-tech. And with the help of Hydra, they naturally have to come up with a return that satisfies Hydra. Therefore, how to make the situation in New York City chaotic has become an issue between the 3 of Taylor. The struggle in the underground world is nothing more than fighting for territory, and fighting for interests. As long as the movement is huge, it is not difficult to attract Jinbian's attention. The most difficult thing is how to bear Jin Bing's anger after attracting Jin Bing's attention, which is the most troublesome. And the people in Hell's Kitchen have always faced Jin and are like a mouse seeing a cat. They have always been the only ones who have been able to hide. How dare they face Jin and grin? And now that they have received the help of Hydra and made the whole Hell's Kitchen prosperous, they are even more reluctant to provoke gold mergers, at least until they have gained enough confidence. But the Hydra side also had to give an explanation, so after some deliberation, the three of Taylor soon came up with new ideas. They don't dare to provoke money, and it doesn't mean that others don't dare to provoke them. Now, aren't there four jubilant guys? Therefore, when the three of them combined, they quickly approved the plan. Hydra could push them out to disrupt the situation, and they could also push superheroes to disrupt the situation, so that they not only completed the tasks given by Hydra, but also were able to preserving strength. No matter how you count it, you will not suffer. Therefore, after determining the plan, the people of Hell's Kitchen quickly planned it. Sunday, sunny. In a certain cafe, Johnny sat in a suit at the coffee table by the window, with a smile on his face, gently stirring the coffee in the cup with a small spoon in his hand. During this period of time, Johnny can be said to be in high spirits. He seems to have become a big star and is sought after by countless people. This feeling makes him nostalgic and intoxicated, so he is more keen to fight criminals. But criminals in this world are limited after all. Even in a sinful city like New York City, it is impossible for murders to happen all the time. Especially with the advent of the Fantastic Four during this period, did not know how many criminals it helped the police catch, which greatly shocked many people, resulting in a sharp drop in the crime rate in New York City. And because of this, Johnny is stuck in a situation where he has nothing to do. This suddenly made him a little panicked. He likes to enjoy people's admiration, he likes everyone to exclaim, and he likes to stand in the center of the world and become the protagonist of the world. And once there is no crime, it means that the superhero has no utility, and he will no longer be noticed by the public. So Johnny is more eager to get more criminal information. After investigating the news that Johnny wanted to get information about the crime, the people in Hell's Kitchen immediately took action and made an appointment to meet at this cafe. Of course, Johnny didn't know about all of this, although he obtained superpowers, but in the end he's just a 20-year-old Maudo. It's too easy to figure him out. A tall white man wearing a black suit and a black top hat walked into the cafe slowly. He glanced around the entire hall, and quickly locked on Johnny's position. At that moment, the corners of the white man's mouth twitched slightly, raised his legs and walked towards Johnny, sitting directly opposite Johnny. Sensing that someone was sitting down, Johnny raised his head, looked at him, raised his brows slightly, and said with a proud expression, "You are the guy who said he could provide me with criminal information on the internet. Where is it? Take it out now." The white man sitting across from Johnny is none other than Tyler, one of the three giants of Hell's Kitchen. Hell's Kitchen wants to use the hands of the Fantastic Four to disrupt the underground order in New York, so how to send information is very important. So in order to avoid accidents, Taylor directly chose to go into battle in person. Listening to Johnny's urging words, Tyler didn't give out the information directly, but laughed. Why is Mr. Johnny in such a hurry? Even if we want information, should we talk about compensation first? Hearing this, Johnny leaned forward slightly, giving a sense of oppression. Do you know who I am? As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the air instantly became tense. And Tyler seemed to be unaware of this, and even the smile on his face was even worse. Mr. Torch's name is naturally familiar to me, but I am a businessman. In business, I can't let me do business at a loss. What do you mean, Mr. Torch? Because the Fantastic Four have been in the limelight during this time, each of them has been given their own nickname, the same as in the previous life. After listening to Taylor's words, a smile suddenly appeared on Johnny's face, and he leaned back slightly to relax. It turned out to be an intelligence businessman. I said why I was just looking for information on criminals, and someone contacted me. Since you also said that you were in business, let's make an offer directly. Johnny's head froze slightly, as he said. And Taylor was relieved at this moment. How to give information, this is a very skillful job. If Taylor threw out the information as soon as he came up, Johnny would definitely not believe it unless he was a second fool. And now Tyler has cast himself as an intelligence businessman, so that not only can everything be justified, but it will not arouse Johnny's suspicion. I have to say that although Johnny is young, his mind is indeed sharp. It's a pity that his little thought is completely playing a big sword in front of Guangdong, and Taylor has already seen it clearly, and Taylor has to pretend to not know. Sure enough, everyone is an acting school, it depends on how important this scene is to you. After completing the foreshadowing and making Johnny believe in his identity, Taylor did not hesitate, and directly quoted, 100,000 federal dollars for a piece of information, which can be cash or credit card. After speaking, Taylor took out a POS machine from his arms. Anyone who sees this scene will subconsciously emerge a word in their mind, professional. In this way, the identity of Taylor's intelligence businessman has been completely shaped successfully. At least for now Johnny believes it. For Taylor's offer, Johnny did not counter-offer, took out the bank card directly from his wallet, and swiped 1 million in one go. Unlike superheroes in the ordinary sense, most superheroes just fight criminals, and while fighting criminals, Johnny does not forget to take care of the sheep. The money came from the criminals he hid, so Johnny spent it with no heartache. And watching Johnny swipe 1 million, Taylor's face suddenly showed a clear joy. It seemed that he was surprised by money, and the nature of an intelligence businessman who regards money as his life is vivid. But if Johnny could stare into Taylor's eyes carefully, he would find that there was no joy in the depths of Taylor's eyes from beginning to end. When the mobile phone received the bank text message notification, Taylor took out a file bag directly from his arms, which contained the information of 10 criminals. Most of them sell small pills. These information are very detailed, even including their residential activity routes, activity addresses, and surrounding bodyguards, all of which have been clearly traced. After reading the information, a look of joy appeared on Johnny's face, and he felt that the money was worth it. Just such detailed information has already increased his odds by 20%. Not bad, I am very satisfied with the things, and I hope we will have a chance to trade next time. After speaking, Johnny got up in a hurry and left the cafe directly. He couldn't wait to enjoy the cheers of the people, so he wanted to set off now. And Taylor looked at the back of him leaving. The smile on his face slowly dissipated, replaced by a cold look. All the intelligence information that Taylor gave him is naturally true, and these intelligences are all from Taylor's investigation of great value. And the only thing he did was to hide the true identities of these people. Because these people are all Jin Bing's subordinates, and they are also Jin Bing's subordinate forces. The reason why he didn't tell Johnny was that he was afraid that Johnny would not dare to do anything after knowing the identities of these people, so he specifically concealed their identities. And now that the first step of the plan has been successfully taken out, everything just needs to be implemented according to the plan. Jin Bing and the Fantastic Four will definitely stand on the opposite side. Taylor smiled cruelly at this, and slowly got up and left the cafe. And when the two left one after another, neither of them noticed that not far from them, Peter Parker in black was sitting here. Since taking off the disguise of a superhero, Peter has completely let go of himself, playing games among the flowers every day, and living a happy life. And all of this stems from the fact that Richard gave him 10 million. On how to become a multi-millionaire with the fastest speed. A. Let Richard give you 10 million, you are a multi-millionaire. Richard never cared much about money. Anyway, it was Jin Bing who was responsible for giving money, not him. What's more, just using 10 million changes to completely tie Spider-Man, it is a good deal no matter how you look at it. The reason why Richard was able to let Dr. Octopus and Peter work for him is not only because of the various means he used, but also because of his wealth and billions of dollars. Money is something that even superheroes cannot ignore. After all, superheroes also need to eat, drink, and pay for things. Richard never puts a man's loyalty to the test, because that kind of thing never stands the test. There is a saying that has always impressed Richard very deeply, that is, the so-called loyalty is only because the chips of betrayal are not enough. So instead of putting hope on the so-called loyalty, Richard takes control of a person's desires by gradually mastering them. What are the hobbies of Dr. Octopus? Scientific research. Research and scientific research requires a variety of materials and instruments. And all these things can be converted into one word, money. Money may not solve 193% of the world's problems, but it can definitely solve 99%. Since taking refuge in Richard, Dr. Octopus no longer needs to worry about scientific research funding. As long as there is a demand, someone will immediately make a call. That's why Dr. Octopus obeys Richard. As for Peter Parker, it's even simpler. What is the biggest dream of a poor person? Of course, is to get rich overnight, and Richard gave Peter 10 million in one breath, completely realizing his dream. The reason why he gave so much in one go was not only because of the lack of shock, but also because of Peter's habit of spending money lavishly. As the saying goes, from simple to extravagant is easy, and from extravagance to frugality is difficult. When Peter has completely developed the habit of spending extravagantly, do you think he will return to the past and struggle for 3 meals a day? The answer speaks for itself. Today Peter was supposed to be here waiting for a new date girl, but accidentally overheard Taylor's PY deal with Johnny. Although the transaction process between the two was very serious, Peter was keenly aware of a hint of conspiracy. CGDH perhaps, this is the sequelae left by being cheated by someone too much. So just after Taylor left the cafe, Peter quickly got up and followed. The reason why he kept up with Taylor was that there was one person he was very familiar with in the information that Taylor came up with. If he remembered correctly, that person should be Jin Bing's subordinate. Don't forget that when Peter was a superhero before, he often dealt with the horses under Kim Bing. So this should be a conspiracy against Jin and forces. Peter wasn't so sure about this, so he followed up. After all, as the father of his boss, Jin Bing is also his actual gold master. If he does nothing, he will feel a little sorry. Of course, this is just an excuse on the surface, but in fact, the 10 million that Richard gave him is almost exhausted. If you want to continue asking for money, it is embarrassing to be empty-handed, and you have to take out something. This is Peter's last phase. With the super spider sensing power, Peter's perception has been locked on Taylor's body. Although there is no Taylor's figure in front of his eyes, he has indeed been following Taylor closely. Soon, after a while, Taylor got into a car, and the car drove towards Wall Street. Wall Street is a famous financial avenue in New York City. There are too many rich people here, and it is also a place that cannot be reached by gold and power. And the people under Jin Bing never come here on their own initiative. This is a tacit understanding that belongs to gold and the upper society of the Stars and Stripes Federation. That's why it's the best place to hide in Hell's Kitchen. Now that the forces of Hell's Kitchen have been integrated, they can only hide in the dark and dare not emerge, so they can only stay on Wall Street temporarily. After Taylor's car entered Wall Street, it quickly stopped at the gate of a building. This building appears to be a stock exchange, and it does trade securities here. But in fact, it is one of the few sources of income in Hell's Kitchen, and where their current lair is. As Taylor walked into the building, Peter's figure soon appeared at the door of the building. Without any hesitation, Peter walked in directly. It was noon at this moment, and it was also a short closing time, so there were not many people in the building. There are only some staff and some shareholders. After Peter came in, he just glanced at the hall, then lifted his legs and walked to the elevator on the side. Peter has never been interested in any kind of securities trading. He used to have no money, but now he doesn't understand, so he naturally won't waste time. Pursuing his spider sense, Peter quickly came to the 15th floor of the building. This is the limit floor that Peter can reach by elevator. If he wants to continue up, he needs a special ID card. Of course, Peter doesn't have an ID card, but don't forget that Peter is Spider-Man. What Spider-Man is best at is naturally climbing walls. I walked out of the elevator, followed the passage, came to the window at the end of the passage, and glanced down. The overall height was about 40 meters. As long as I didn't pay special attention, almost no one would notice that there would be a person hanging on the wall of the high-rise building. Climbing up neatly, in less than 3 minutes, Peter has reached the top 25th floor. The 25th floor was empty and quiet, and Peter didn't even need to enter it to hear Taylor's voice. At the moment, Tyler is talking with Vickers and Wilson about his contact with Johnny, and at the same time, their plans and Hydra are also mentioned in the words. Little did they know that all their conversations at the moment had already fallen into Peter's ears, causing a burst of surprise on Peter's face. After listening for the final 20 minutes, the three of Taylor ended their conversation, and Peter chose to leave. Just like a cloud, it came and walked gently, without making any waves. At the gate of the campus, with the sound of the end of get out of class bell, the students walked out of the campus one after another. Richard also mixed in with the crowd and walked outside the campus. Monica is like a little follower, following Richard's side. The longer they get along, the closer their relationship becomes. Richard, I'm leaving first. Mom is here to pick me up. Remember to come early tomorrow. Monica waved her little hand reluctantly, and walked back to a car step by step. Sitting in the car was a capable white woman who had a 3-point resemblance to Monica, and the relationship between the two was self-evident. Without answering Monica's words, Richard just waved his hand in response. After watching Monica get into the car, he turned and walked towards the car opposite the school gate. Daniel was already waiting by the side of the car, and as Richard approached, he immediately stepped forward and opened the car door respectfully. Just when Richard was about to get into the car, a call suddenly sounded behind him. "Hey, long time no see." While speaking, Peter came out of nowhere, with a smile on the sky, greeting him. Seeing Peter, Richard also smiled, reached out and beckoned at him. Richard got into the car directly, while Peter hesitated, and quickly followed. As the two got into the car, Daniel got into the cab, started the car and slowly drove away from the campus gate. Inside the car, Richard stared at Peter half-smile, with a playful smile on the corner of his mouth. "I thought you ran away with money after disappearing for so many days." Hearing this, a look of embarrassment appeared on Peter's face. But now he is no longer the innocent big boy, so this embarrassment comes and goes quickly. Soon, Peter cleared up the emotions on his face, and said solemnly, "I just went to inquire about the information for you. I received a message that some forces are targeting your father recently, so I came here to tell you." "Oh," Richard let out a soft moan, but his face didn't change much. He just gestured slightly and made a gesture of listening. Seeing Richard's uninterested appearance, Peter was suddenly caught off guard. Shouldn't a normal person's reaction be to ask who is he when he hears that someone is targeting someone related to him? There were doubts in his mind, and Peter was not polite and asked directly. "Looking at you, you don't seem to be very interested." Hearing this, Richard looked out the window, looking at the passing scenery outside the window. His tone was flat. "The world's interest cake is so big. Some people eat more and others eat less. My father occupies so many interests. Isn't it normal for some people to deliberately target them?" As soon as these words came out, Peter's tone suddenly choked, and he didn't know what to say for a while. Before that, he thought his intelligence was very important, but after Richard said this, he suddenly felt that his situation was not important anymore. But everyone came, and he didn't say anything. It wasn't a waste of his previous efforts. At the moment, Peter could only say with a gloomy expression, "If I had known that this kind of information was worthless, I wouldn't have spent so much effort." Hydra's people have set their sights on you and found a group of forces called Hell's Kitchen. They want them to fight with Jinping, distract Jinping's attention, and then fish in troubled waters. And these people from Hell's Kitchen have found the Fantastic Four, who have recently become famous, and sold them your personnel information, intending to use their hands to target you. After speaking, Peter let out a long sigh, obviously still depressed because the information he obtained was worthless. As everyone knows, when he said the word Hydra, Richard's ears stood up. Whether intelligence is valuable or not depends on what the intelligence is about. And for this, Peter obviously doesn't have a very clear concept, but Richard has it. If nothing else, the news that Hydra is eyeing Jinping is enough to make Richard take it seriously. What's more, there are also Hell's Kitchen and superheroes in it. Even Richard didn't expect that Peter had brought back such a big piece of information. However, the previous words were exported, and Richard naturally wouldn't do such things as slap himself in the face. He silently recorded Peter's information in his heart, but his face was still flat, and he said to Daniel, who was driving, "Give Peter 10 million later." Hearing this, Daniel, who was driving, nodded directly. "Understood, Mr. Richard." And Peter, after hearing this, his face became a little surprised. Why? In Peter's opinion, his intelligence is worthless, and it should not be worth much money, but he didn't expect Richard to call him another 10 million, and Peter's mood became a little complicated for a while. Richard looked at Peter's face, and immediately noticed the thoughts in Peter's heart. Where would he miss this opportunity to buy people's hearts? Although the information is worthless, I am very happy that you can take the initiative to do things for me. In the future, if you are short of money, go to Daniel directly. You don't need to engage in any intelligence transactions. Since you have taken refuge with me, I will naturally be responsible for all your expenses. Richard's words were incomparably grand, and also comforting to hear. Stupid Peter was really excited at the moment. He may not have heard the sentence that a scholar dies for his confidant, but at this moment he suddenly felt that there was nothing wrong with following Richard's back. In this way, Peter was fooled by Richard again, and he was completely moved by it. Not how smart Richard was, or how stupid Peter was. It is because the information held by the two is not equal, and the perspectives of the two parties are also different, so it seems that Richard has made a profit and Peter has lost, but if it is from Peter's point of view, Peter will only think that he has made a profit. Life is like this, how can there be so many distinctions, and more is the pursuit of a result that everyone can accept. Peter eventually got out of the car at a red light intersection and was temporarily dismissed by Richard. Although the information sent by Peter was very important, Richard was not in a hurry, because he had not yet thought about how to deal with this matter. Hydra and Hell's Kitchen can tell Jin and let Jin handle it himself, but Fantastic Four, Richard wants to play with them himself. Mainly, about the villain of the Fantastic Four, Richard really has no memory. He wants to draw this villain out through the Fantastic Four, and then try to absorb it into the Dark Alliance. Perhaps he sensed Richard's embarrassment, and at this moment, the system's cold electronic synthesis sound took the initiative to sound. Mission: recruit Alliance members. Target: Dr. Doom. Sei Ming. This is a genius who surpassed the times. In order to save his mother, he mastered magic and science with the power of mortals. Systematic review. 2-star member, strongly recommended to be accepted. Reward: 2 draws. Note: he is a cunning guy, the one you see may not be the real him. Hearing the electronically synthesized sound in his mind, Richard's expression changed, and he quickly summoned the mission information. As he glanced at it, Richard's face gradually became serious. This is the second time the system has actively released missions, and the first is to release the Dark Alliance mission. And the reward this time has directly reached 2 lottery draws, which is the task with the highest single reward among all the tasks released by the system. And what caught Richard's attention the most was that this guy could do magic. For a while, Richard's mind couldn't help but think of what Dad said in the previous anime, only magic can defeat magic. Based on the above, the relaxed attitude in Richard's heart has completely disappeared, replaced by a touch of seriousness and excitement. At the same time, Richard's eyes couldn't help but stay on the systematic review. 2-star review: is this good or bad? Richard is not clear about this, and the system has not given a specific explanation. But neither Peter nor Dr. Octopus has given any evaluation, so although Richard doesn't know the specific criteria, it can be predicted that Dr. Doom is definitely stronger than Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man. The thoughts in his mind were spinning quickly, and Richard was finally sent home by Daniel. It was not until he stepped into the house that Richard's frantic thoughts slowly stopped. He let out a sigh of turbidity, and Richard temporarily put down all the thoughts in his mind. Right now, this matter is still unfinished, and Richard doesn't know where to start, so he can only take a step by step. After eating, reading, and talking with Jin Ping about the Hydra and Hell's Kitchen, Richard's daily life just passed by. And when night fell, when everything was completely silent, Richard got up from the bed. About Dr. Doom, Richard doesn't have much clues for the time being, but since the system is a mission released at this time, it means that Dr. Doom should be the villain of the Fantastic Four. That being the case, I just need to stare at the Fantastic Four. Coupled with the intelligence given by Peter during the day, Richard pushed open the window and jumped out after getting dressed. Leaving his room, Richard's figure soared into the sky, and under the effect of the rabbit charm and the chicken charm, he quickly walked towards Manly Avenue. If it is said that Manton is the city center of New York City and the representative of New York City's prosperity, then Manly Avenue is the performance of New York City's nightlife. Not only rich young masters, people from the bottom, but also countless 3 religions and 9 streams are gathered here. Luxury cars that are rarely seen on weekdays are everywhere on Manly Avenue, and there is no shortage of beautiful young models that are rarely seen here. There are even famous Hollywood personalities haunting Manly Avenue. Here, you can see the elites in suits and leather collars, and the gangsters and berserkers hang on their shoulders. On weekdays, the glamorous beauty, who should not be approached by strangers, twists her graceful body on the dance floor. No matter what their identity is during the day, but at night, in this place, everyone will let go of the shackles of identity. And most importantly, in Manly Avenue, they don't have to worry about safety issues. As long as you don't want to, you can say no to anyone and anything, and no one dares to embarrass you. Just because this is the site of Jinbian, the entire Manly Avenue was built by Jinbian. Therefore, although there is a mix of fish and dragons here, there is no need to worry about any security issues at all. Under such entertainment venues, some bad things naturally have the soil to grow. And these are also done by Jinbian people, but they are not forced to buy or sell, they are all voluntary. When the Fantastic Four appeared on Manly Avenue, looking at the bustling scene in front of them, the eyes of the three of Reed were all focused on Johnny. And Johnny was also a little uncomfortable by the eyes of the three, and he was a little annoyed at the moment. Why are you looking at me like this? When the words fell, the three of Reed didn't care about Johnny's tone, but asked a little strangely, didn't you say that a crime is happening here? Now you tell me where a crime is happening. Hearing this, Johnny suddenly looked unconvinced and said, why not? There must be some people in these bars dealing in drugs, isn't this illegal? As soon as these words came out, a look of disappointment appeared on Reed's face, and he looked at Johnny and shook his head. Do you think such a thing should be handled by us? Isn't it? Johnny asked back, and Reed was completely disappointed with him, but after thinking about it, he still explained. The meaning of our existence is to save people in times of crisis. These drug transactions are the federal government's responsibility, not ours. I know what you said is right, they did break the law, but without seeing it with our own eyes, we can't prove what they did. Once you break in, and there is no evidence, then it will be us who have committed the crime, you understand. As soon as these words came out, Johnny was dumbfounded and opened his mouth, but could not find any words to refute. The plan made by the people of Hell's Kitchen, although not very clever, is above the normal level. It's just that they, who have never been in contact with superheroes, have overlooked one point, that is, the same illegal crimes. Some things superheroes can intervene, and some things superheroes can't intervene, or can't intervene. For example, in a street robbery, in the public eye, superheroes appear to defeat criminals, which will naturally be cheered by the public. But like drug transactions in entertainment venues, due to the lack of direct evidence, even if a superhero appears on the scene and arrests people, it will only make people think that superheroes rely on their abilities to bully ordinary people, and will not make people feel that superheroes are stopping them. Crime. For these things, Johnny hadn't thought about it before, or he subconsciously ignored it, and he didn't react suddenly until he was alerted by Reed now. If you really do according to your own ideas, let alone get the attention of the public, you may even be sprayed to death by the public. After all, whether a person is guilty or not depends on the evidence. There is no evidence. Even a superhero's name is not good enough with just one mouth. Otherwise, if you really rely on one mouth to convict, God knows how many people will die because of it. Thinking of this, Johnny lowered his head in shame, even though he had the arrogance and impulsiveness of a young man. But that doesn't mean Johnny can't face his own mistakes. So after realizing that he was wrong, he immediately apologized to the three of Reed. I took it for granted, I apologize for what I just said. Seeing this, the three of Reed laughed immediately, and they reached out and patted Johnny's shoulder. It's okay. A few people solved the misunderstanding, and Susan on the side also said at this moment, what should we do now? Just go back like this. As soon as these words came out, Johnny and Grim also turned their attention to Reed. And Reed looked at everyone's appearance, pondered for a while, and then raised his mouth. Since everyone is here, then everyone should take a good look, and by the way, also see the nightlife of Manly Avenue. After speaking, Reed laughed suddenly, and Susan and the others also laughed. At the moment, a few people mingled in the crowd and walked into Manly Avenue. And just as they walked on their front feet, a small figure on their back feet suddenly appeared where they were standing. Richard looked at the backs of several people, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. When Reed spoke just now, he was on the side the whole time, but he used the snake charm to hide, so Reed and the others didn't notice it at all. To Richard's surprise, it didn't take long for them to acquire the ability, but it was very rare to have grasped the position of superheroes so quickly. In fact, the superheroes active in New York City are definitely not only the Fantastic Four, but why only the Fantastic Four are famous in New York and have reached the height of Spider-Man. It's because they, like Spider-Man, are basically able to distinguish between good and evil at a glance. Unlike Daredevil and Punisher, although what they did can be considered justice, they are more accustomed to solving it themselves rather than handing it over to the police. In this way, although their motives for their actions are just, their actions have already violated the law. Plus they don't crave the attention of others like the Fantastic Four, so it's not as well known. Accidents are accidents, but Richard's purpose remains the same. Follow the Fantastic Four to search for possible villains and find out if he is the Doctor Doom you are looking for. Therefore, the Fantastic Four walking on Manly Avenue were completely unaware at this moment, and before they knew it, they were already being watched. Time passed quickly, and when the four of Reed walked out of Manly Avenue, they all had surprised expressions on their faces. They have never been to Manly Avenue before, so they don't know much about Manly Avenue. In the eyes of Reed, an entertainment place like Manly Avenue would definitely be very confusing. But they turned a full circle, only to find that things were completely different from what they had imagined. Everyone had a good time, and it was all of their own free will. There was no imagined violent conflict, and no imagined chaos. On the contrary, under the lively, there was a sense of order. Immediately, the impression of several people on Manly Avenue was greatly increased. If the timing was not right, this place is indeed a good place for entertainment. As for Johnny, he was even more depressed about this. He spent money and bought information, but in the end he found that his information was useless at all. This feeling was the same as buying counterfeit and shoddy products, which made people feel depressed and unhappy. But it's already like this, and Johnny can only recognize it by pinching his nose. Soon the group left Manly Avenue by car and headed towards the Rambo building, while Richard floated invisibly above them and followed closely. When the Fantastic Four returned to the Rambo mansion, Richard did not enter the Rambo mansion with them. Instead, his figure suddenly rose into the sky and quickly came to the top floor of the 520th building of Lambeau University. Just when Richard arrived at the Rambo building just now, he suddenly felt a special breath, which came from the top floor of the Rambo building. When he came to the top floor, Richard's sharp eyes immediately glanced towards the interior of the building. This is an obvious private laboratory with various instruments. In this private laboratory, a white man was sitting in front of the computer, playing with something serious. The special aura that Richard felt just now also emanated from him. Looking at this person at this moment, Richard had a strong intuition that the person in front of him was the person he was looking for. But Richard wondered why he didn't find himself. Even though Richard is still invisible now, so that he can't see his figure, as a magician, he should have a good understanding of the aura around him. And now that Richard, a strange aura, broke into this place, the white man didn't respond. Could it be that he made a mistake? At this moment, doubts appeared in Richard's mind. Doubts just popped up in my mind, but Richard rejected it in a blink of an eye. He did feel a special breath on the white man, but this breath was very weak, like a candle in the wind, it might dissipate at any time. Without waiting for Richard to think too much, the door of the laboratory suddenly opened, and Reed walked in. This scene appeared very suddenly, which caught the white man by surprise, but in just a moment he stabilized his emotions, turned off the computer on the table, got up and looked at the others like Reed, and asked first, "Where are you going?" "Already." As soon as these words came out, Ling Gang was going to ask Reed why he was here, and subconsciously replied, "Go out and deal with some things." After speaking, Reed frowned again and said, "Victor, why are you here? How did you get in?" Hearing this, Victor Von Doom suddenly smiled, "Why can't I come in? Don't forget the data you promised me, I'll see how it goes," but obviously, Reed, you didn't care. Victor spoke while laughing, gradually taking control of the rhythm of the conversation at the scene, and causing the topic to shift to other places silently. Sure enough, Reed did not continue to struggle. How did Victor get in? And he hurriedly explained, "I know, I have completed most of it, give me a little more time, the data will be ready soon, when the time comes I'll give it to you myself." After listening, Victor hummed, then put his hands on his chest and said, this is the best, I hope I can get the data I want as soon as possible. When he said this, there was a hint of command in Victor's tone, and Reed could only correct this with a wry smile. As the so-called short-handed and soft-hearted, Victor provided him with funds when he needed help the most, but he did not give the data Victor wanted. Naturally, there is some lack of confidence. After chatting for a while, Victor didn't stay any longer and left the laboratory with his legs raised. After watching Victor walk out of the laboratory, the free Susan, who had never spoken, immediately spoke up. I don't like him. Me too. I always think, what should he have done just now? Was it only interrupted by our sudden entry? Hearing this Grimm's words, Reed frowned. He's my college classmate, we've always been good friends, and he won't do anything. Grimm didn't agree with this, and shrugged immediately. I trust my own intuition, I think you'd better be on guard against him. After that, seeing Reed's face gradually becoming ugly, Grimm stopped talking, turned and walked towards his room. The group had some quarrels because of Victor's arrival, and they naturally didn't know about Richard. Just after Victor left, Richard gave up the Fantastic Four decisively and followed Victor directly. He believed in his own judgment. Victor must be the person he was looking for, because the special aura on him couldn't deceive anyone. As for why Victor couldn't find out, Richard felt that it should be related to the precautions prompted by the system. He's a sly guy, what you see may not be the real him. Silently recalling the prompts from the system, Richard gradually had an idea in his heart, but he needed to test it out before that. Thinking of this, Richard's eyes narrowed and he looked at Victor, who was walking towards the vehicle. Suddenly, a flame appeared in the center of Richard's palm. With the slight swing of his arm, the flame suddenly floated towards the vehicle in front of Victor. Go! The speed seems to be slow, but it is actually extremely fast, and it falls on Victor's vehicle in an instant. Victor, who was just about to get into the car, didn't wait for him to open the car door when a raging fire suddenly set his car on fire. The fire in Richard's hand is naturally not a flame in the ordinary sense. Although he doesn't know what is special about this flame, all the results of Richard's tests so far have shown that, except for water, which is inherently mutually exclusive, Dragon the Talisman made the flames under his control basically have nothing to burn. Even steel will gradually soften under the fire of the dragon charm, so burning a car is nothing. Almost as soon as the flames touched the vehicle burst into flames, completely swallowing the vehicle into the flames. The sudden scene made Victor stunned in place. Looking at the instantly burning vehicle and the high temperature in the air, Victor's hand that had stretched out to the door was instantly retracted, and his figure suddenly jumped back, away from the car, the flames. And for the first time, he looked around, his face was full of anger, and he shouted angrily, Diaresis, Thunderbolt, please come out for me. Hearing this, the invisible Richard was stunned for a moment, and then instantly relieved. The Human Torch controls the power of the flame, and now Victor's car is burned down by the flames, so Victor's subconscious instantly believes that the Human Torch did it. In this regard, Richard was a little speechless. At this moment, he was finally sure that the Victor in front of him was definitely not the Dr. Doom he was looking for. But there must be some connection between him and Dr. Doom, maybe even a clone. Although he didn't know if his guess was right, Richard decided to try it out in person. Good king. At the moment, Richard stopped hiding his figure and removed the power of the snake charm. Suddenly, Richard's figure slowly appeared in the air and appeared in front of Victor. Looking at this scene, Victor, who was scolding the Human Torch, was suddenly stunned, and looked at Richard with his eyes slightly raised, and the whole person lost his voice. Who are you? Hearing this, Richard's face suddenly feigned a wicked smile, and said in a low and hoarse voice, You smell like a devil, I'm here to find you. Richard's low tone, coupled with his pretentious evil smile at the moment, and the terrifying aura slowly exuding from his body, instantly quelled Victor, who was just an ordinary person. Looking at Richard, feeling the terrifying aura slowly exuding from Richard's body, Victor only felt that his breathing suddenly became rapid, and the air around him seemed to be completely evacuated. No matter how hard he tried, can't continue to get air. At this moment, his brain was blank, and his face became extremely red, but he didn't show anything special for a long time. This made Richard, who saw all this in his eyes, couldn't help frowning. It was naturally his handwriting that Victor became like this. Originally, according to Richard's conjecture, there must be a relationship between Victor and Doctor Doom. When Victor encounters his life in danger, he should have a special reaction. But Victor is just like an ordinary person, struggling with the lack of oxygen, and under Richard's momentum, he has no power to fight back. It was as if Richard had guessed wrong. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.